2015 at 7 p.m. in the Houghton Building, 697 Main Street. And first up, we have some administrative business. Carol, do you have bills, mail?
I don't have any bills actually tonight. I do have just one piece of mail that came in today that I wanted to share. And then just one piece of correspondence to follow up on. So Kinder Morgan's open houses were postponed because of the snow last week. And the one in Berlin's been rescheduled for February 25th. So those are still from 6 to 8. And since they're doing many more throughout Mass, New York, Connecticut, New Hampshire, I'm sure we'll be getting some further information on sort of the setup and how it goes and what we should be kind of prepared to talk to them about, that kind of thing.
I just realized we forgot to do the roll call.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Janet Passatoro.
Jim Stone.
Liz Lecluse, Maria Berman, Laura Stevenson.
Brian Barrowby.
And I think Heinz is still coming, but
Okay.
I didn't hear he wasn't.
Welcome back.
Good to see you.
So then the other administrative thing. So yeah, I'm going to be gone next week, so I just wanted to make sure somebody was going to be available if they needed to reach anyone, for following up on questions or building permits or anything that comes through. Is there anybody who knows they're not going to be available that I could say don't call Janet or don't call Jim? No? Okay. And then I also sent out just some comments on a proposal that the planning board has coming up for February 11th. And I'm going to submit the comments tomorrow so that they have something before we leave. That's on the common driveway. So I didn't know if anybody had a chance to look at that or had any additional comments. I was trying to focus on the fact that with the crossing that they're proposing, and then they're proposing 2 different stormwater basins on either side of the crossing. So the alteration includes like 1,500 square feet or something for the crossing, and then another, I think one basin, just the bottom of the infiltration basin, I think was like 3,000. They didn't give us the full dimension. And then another one was another 1,000 or so. So just in that whole corridor of that whole wetland and adjacent upland resource area, that's quite a lot of alteration. So I was trying to get them to look at other options, I guess. And one of them would be, as Brian has mentioned, before that he's, a bridge that he has to, on his own property. So that's another option is to look at, how can they minimize it? It's on Long Hill Road, Henry? You don't remember that, seeing that? Anyway, so if you have further comment on it, or if you have them tonight, you want to share anything, or if you want to send it, I'm going to have to get it to her tomorrow. Did you have comments on?
What's that?
On the Long Hill one for the public hearing that's going before the planning board?
Meadow Road, Long Hill?
Yeah, just Long Hill. But it's almost across from, it's more across from Annymore Road.
Mm-hmm.
Did
Sorry.
you see those comments? I was just
Oh,
asking
I
if you
did
had
not.
comments.
No.
Okay. But I did send them out, right?
Yes.
Send them out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. So that's good. So that's all I have for announcements. And I guess the only other follow-up is just the MCC still, so I know Liz said she was going to try to go, and so we just need to get reimbursement if you're going to do that, when they give you the receipt or whatever, get that to me.
Minutes for January 20th. Comments on that? I guess I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes for January 20th, 2015.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Sorry, who seconded it? I didn't say. Jim? Do you have 7:15?
7.
Okay.
Seven.
Because there's no clock on the wall anymore.
What's your
The computer says 7:13.
7:13. My computer says 7:13.
My turn. Well, I could tell you just quickly, I could tell you about Ross real quick, that one. So, the Bolton Conservation Trust is going to speak, their representatives are gonna talk with the Ross family and see, if there's something that they can either help them figure out or work out, and they're gonna do that this week. At least that's the schedule, so maybe at the next meeting we'll have some better idea on that. But we should at that point be trying to decide whether we're gonna, have an option, or whether we're gonna, tell the selectmen that we're not interested in that.
Yeah, that's
The release.
great. It's great that they're gonna go back to them. Still have 30 seconds.
Well, I was gonna ask to have everyone sign in, so
Oh,
I could
okay.
start with that.
Sure.
Do you need to put that?
Oh, sure. Very nice.
Conservation, but
There you go.
Yes.
All right, next up is Vickery, 539 Aquatic Hill Road, request for determination, continuing the public meeting. Like to come up, you can pull your chairs up if you like. Okay, just want to say we set aside an hour for this meeting, and I know you have a lot of supporters, and if you'd like them to speak, I could suggest that we have them speak at the end, but if you disagree, if we can.
Absolutely agree.
All right.
My name's Alan Lipkin. You haven't met me yet.
Hi.
I'm an attorney for Jen Vickery. You've met Mickey Martz before. This is a request for a determination of applicability to move a shed. Jen Vickery is here as well. It's turned into something a little bit more than moving a shed. As you know, a neighbor complained about a shed being too close to the property line. That resulted in a visit from Carol, and a drainage swell was discovered on the property. We think it's a minimal swell, but it is a drainage swell, and Mickey has with him a written proposal that we think truly not only minimizes the impacts of this operation, which is, you've heard about before, it's a rescue farm operation. It does have horses and ponies there, but really consistent with the historic use of the property in terms of the number of horses that have been there. But this proposal that Mickey has put together in writing, some of which I think you've heard about before. We discussed some pieces of it with Mr. Hellwig in a very, that was a good conversation we had the other day. Moves the activity away from this drainage swell over to the eastern side of the swell by moving the shed over there, moving the whatever these horses feed out of, feeding stations, some water, fences off the bottom of this long, thin paddock, puts vegetation in there, which forms, Mickey will tell you about, a natural filter strip to filter the water. As you know, I believe Jen has said this to you before, it's not an operation where the manure is left on the ground, it's picked up and it's put in some sort of dumpster. I don't want to say much more about it. I'm just a lawyer, Mickey's a scientist, he can explain and answer your questions. I would just hope that when you listen to what we're talking about, which is a request for a negative determination of applicability coupled with conditions, that you will exercise your discretion, bearing in mind that we are doing everything we can to minimize any potential impacts on the resource area. To some extent, we're leaving it better than it was by putting in this vegetated filter strip. We'll be preserving a use that, to me, is really a pearl of a use that really does honor to the town and the region by having this rescue operation and allowing people to interact with the animals. And I would hope that you could exercise your discretion in favor of granting the negative determination with the conditions as Mickey's laid them out. And Other than that, I thank you for your service, and if when Nikki's done, there are any questions that I can answer, I'll be happy to do so, and on behalf of Jen, we thank you for the time you put into it.
Hi all, I'm Mickey Marcus. I'm a professional wetland scientist with New England Environmental. So I've been seeing you here since October. You asked us to come in, Commission asked us to file a permit with you, which we did in November. So I think there's, a couple of issues, and I think, in some of the correspondence and some of the meetings, you make clear it's not just the shed, it's the land use, it's, how can Jen's operation protect the wetland resource areas. And so, we've really looked at this long and hard, and the bottom line is that this existing paddock, at issue is important to her operation. She can't abandon and just close it off. That would be the easiest thing to do, just not use that paddock. Instead, what we've proposed is a number of ways to minimize the use of that area by the animals, but still have it available if they choose to use it. And I'll go through what those are. And I guess just historically, I was only able to go back to aerial photos to 1995. I know we can do better research and go back further, but in 1995, that area was a pasture. When I go back to the surveyed site plan of a property, which was 1967, it shows the barbed wire fence along that whole edge of the pasture. So what Jen's discussion with the two previous property owners is consistent that she didn't clear the land. What she has is land that's been in use by horses and previously by cattle in that area consistently. So she's been using land for this purpose in the 10 years that she's owned that property.
Well, can I comment?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, that may be true. However, when we looked at the old maps, it was completely vegetated, and when we saw it in the fall, it was not vegetated. That's the difference. So that is what we thought compromises. It's a big change.
Our horses do tear up the ground, and it was pretty heavily used last fall when we all looked at it. So there were a couple of, I'm just going to go through step by step, and I'll give you, I have these written down. I just want to just tell you what we had in mind, see if you think we're on the right track with this. The first piece was there's a 3-sided shed. It's not a foundation, it's on the ground. It's presently about 17 feet from the drainage swale, which you've all said is too close. And it's also it's on the side of the drainage swale where the horses have to cross over the swale to get to it. Jen says she can move it to the far end of one of her paddocks. It would end up being about 58 feet from the drainage swale.
Excuse me.
Oh,
would that be-
okay. I thought you said 85 or.
Yep, there's,
Which was it?
so in the determination of applicability, it was 58 feet, everything was 58 feet. The last memo that I sent you, I said 85, but that was my dyslexia kicking in.
Oh, okay, so there's no change.
There's no change, it's as presented here, it's about 58 feet away.
I should just add, because I haven't yet, my name's Todd Helwig, and I'm counsel for the town. I just want, on that last point, when you say 58 feet from the swale, are we talking from the center of it, or are we talking from the edge of the bordering vegetated wetland, if you were to figure out where that was?
Sure, so it's an unvegetated drainage swale bank, so it's from the edge closest to where the shed would go. And so when we went out there with a tape measure, we just measured 58 feet to a point where Jen thought the shed should go.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm just gonna,
So C85, I actually thought this was a change. So
yeah,
are there
no, I
any
apologize,
changes?
that's my.
Are there any changes from the?
No, there
Oh,
aren't
just-
in that location. I'm just gonna, this is a picture from the determination. So number one would be moving the swale, moving the shed. The second is that there's a number, in this paddock, there's what Jen calls hay racks. So basically, large stands where you put bales of hay, it's feeding stations or hay racks. So the horses are gonna go where the food is. The other plan was to take those existing hay racks, move them to different paddocks, so when the horses wanna go feed, they don't have to cross this stream. So basically, it removes the shelter, it removes the feed to other areas. And lastly, there are also water troughs in that area. Those can get moved to different paddocks. So the idea is to try to, this area is available, but there's nothing dry in there. They don't need to shelter there, they don't need to feed there, they don't need to water there, but it's land that they need to get away from other animals. So the horses just need room to move around.
So it would be always open to them?
I'll get to that, yep. Part of it, one of the discussions that all of you had was, can you reduce the size of the paddock and revegetate it? Jen can do that. She did put up some temporary fencing on the southern end of the paddock. And the idea is to basically, I'm not sure of the dimensions, but it's about the southern 50 feet approximately of the area, would be permanently fenced off. So basically have a permanent fence and then just vegetate it as a filter strip. So the area would be seeded, allowed to grow up as tall grass. Any drainage from the entire paddock, including the drainage swale, would have to go through that. And it's one of the things that you asked for, Jen did, is have a discussion with the NRCS people. They are not able to do the type of management plan that used to do for small farms, but the filter strip was one of the suggestions they thought was a good idea. So the idea is to take the lower part of the pasture, lose it for horse acreage, and just have it as a grass filter strip.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Did you talk about a filter strip along this stream? Did they talk about that? Because that, all the literature sort of discusses that.
Yeah, the issue there is that it's
No,
not.
I know that. I just wondered if NRCS said anything about that.
I can let Jen speak, but the idea is that, one of the ideas that you had was to fence off that swale, eliminate the use by the horses, and there's not enough room to do that and to have a safe passage for the horses. You end up with too small in areas. So I think that type of filter strip is not practical to keep the horses out of that area, because it's in the center of this paddock. There's just not
Very
enough
narrow
room.
paddock.
But so my question really was, did NRCS have anything to say about having the buffer strip along that? I understand what you're saying,
Yeah,
but I just,
not-
because that's, again, what the literature all talks about.
Yeah, not to my knowledge, not for that area, but they seem to think that the lower area was a reasonable plan. So basically, all the drainage right now goes through this paddock. It crosses the driveway, there's a culvert, so basically everything on the whole site would have some permanent vegetative buffer to go through before it goes off-site. I also just want to point out that there's never been any, there's never been any reported issue of water quality or drainage or algae blooms or anything going off-site presently. So this is just trying to make it better, make sure that there are no watershed issues in the future.
I'm sorry, you said
Yep.
that all the water will come through this before it goes off-site?
Yep. So right now, all the drainage comes through her farm, and there's a small culvert under her driveway. It goes under her driveway and then down a hill off of her property. Yeah. It's not really confined at that point. There's no permanent stream channel. There's nothing that's there permanently. She presently has a waste hauler with one of those metal dumpsters where all the manure goes there. I think part of the, agreement or concession or one of the things that Jen would do is just continue to do that, so that she wouldn't have any stockpiling of manure on the property. The manure gets collected from not just the paddocks, but all the farms, the barns, they get put in the dumpster, they're hauled off-site. So I guess what we're saying is no stockpiling of manure on the property. No new paddocks or turnout areas are proposed. In the original determination, we said, well, maybe one way to reduce the use of this paddock with the drainage swale is create a new area. That NRCS didn't think that was an appropriate location or area. You guys had questions about that. You weren't sure whether you wanted to do that. There's some other issues with creating new area. It's forested, it's rocky, it's not that flat, so it was just a bad idea. We were just looking for alternatives, but that's not reasonable for many different issues. There's no work proposed within 100 feet of water vegetation wetland. We're talking about basically a buffer zone to a bank, State Wetlands Protection Act, as well as your upland resource area, 75 feet. The other thing that Jennifer Vickery is able to do is manage her horses in a way that minimizes the traffic, particularly in times when this intermittent drainage swale has water flowing in it. So she does have the ability to cut off all the different paddocks, are all interconnected. The ideal situation is that they're all open, the horses can move away from each other, they have enough area. But if there are conditions like there's a storm and flow, she does have the ability to cut that off. And so she's agreed that she can manage her horses, her paddocks, to minimize the use when those areas have flow and when we would see the most erosion. I will tell you that the most important time of the year for her to use this area is in the wintertime. That's a time when we have frozen conditions or snow cover, but that's not an issue. But that's actually the time of the year when the horses need the most room. It's not necessarily the other times of the year.
How you deal with it now? Like, so when you have like the 3 feet of snow, do you plow it out? Do you snow blow it out? Or is it not used? The paddock?
Are you speaking to me?
Well, whoever they could answer it.
Yes, yeah. So the if you recall, there was a paddock area, mostly in the woods to the right side of the driveway when you came in the site. That's really not used in the winter at all, but in the summer it is used, and that's why the winter areas become more important because they have a slightly smaller area.
So how is that particular paddock with the stream going through it, how is that one cleared?
It's not. They're not
Oh.
plowed. I mean, the horses trample it down.
Oh, really, even with 3 or 4 feet of snow, they can?
I'll let Jen answer how she.
So how is that managed, right? That's what I was getting.
Do you plow or clear the
I
snow?
don't plow or clear the snow. It's actually better for the horse to have the cushioning of the snow
Oh,
to
really?
walk through than to plow it, and then as it melts, it turns into ice. And that's very, very risky for the animals to be walking over on ice. So having the snow, and it kind of creates uneven terrain and it packs under their feet, is much better for their footing, and it's much safer for the animals. So I don't plow the turnouts, I let the horses, and you'll see that, they just try to avoid the very, very deep areas for sure. In the winter, they limit where they go.
Thank you.
It takes a lot more snow than we have
Yeah.
to impede the horses.
That's right, it's actually better for them. It's unlike us trying to have it nice and smooth so we don't have to work. That's safer for them than sliding on the ice.
And then the last item is I know that you want to have the ability for compliance. That Jen makes these changes, moves the feeder, moves the shed, and so Jen would allow the commission to arrange a site visit once that work was done, so you can be satisfied that she's created the filter strips, moved the feeders, moved the water troughs, moved the shed, and have you have that ability to see for yourself that she's in compliance with these items that I'm talking about. So that's our, I guess, our proposal and plan. I just read off.
This is a
here.
summary kind of thing?
Yeah,
This-
yeah, it is. It is. Sorry. So that's, I guess that's what, that work is what we're proposing. And happy to, you know, go through any of these items, see what you think, what your take is on that. But that's what we think is a way of protecting the wetland resource areas on the site, minimizing damage or use, and come up with a plan that is practical and workable to implement for the farm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, thank you. I think importantly, the first thing we should probably talk about, what we agree on, right? And I think we agree that this is a regulated area under the act, right? And so I think what the applicants are doing, and please let me know if you think I'm wrong, is that they're saying through this application that while it's a regulated area, if we condition the activity in this fashion, it doesn't harm the regulated area. And so the decision for the commission is, are these conditions sufficient to not harm the area? Or are other conditions required to get to that point, right? If you can get to that point with conditions, then you can issue them the relief that you're looking for. Because the idea being is, there is no impact if the conditions are followed, right? That's one way to look at this. There is some sensitivity on the town's part, though, too, also, that perhaps a notice of intent process is the better way to approach this. But if we were to look at a notice of intent process, the outcome would be largely the same, which is, it just says that there is a regulated area, there is an activity happening, you can continue the activity subject to these conditions. And I'm just saying this because the town has historically treated similar uses with orders of conditions as opposed to the RDA process. I'm not saying that one way or the other is better or not for these purposes, but at least that's what we're wrestling with, okay? So I guess what does the commission feel about these conditions? And you might all, by the way, say that there are no conditions that can work for you. So it's within your discretion to do this. What do you think?
Well, anybody else wanna?
Sure.
Go
First of all, I appreciate your characterization. I admit that I would like to see a situation where all sides are as happy with the outcome as possible, that we can hopefully come to an agreement on conditions, either with or without determination that the resource can be protected and the activities can continue. And I think this list is a very good start. I think we should discuss it.
So, I guess, my feeling all along is that it would be very hard for me to issue a negative determination without revegetation of the stream. And it might be that under the use you are describing, it could eventually become revegetated. I don't know. I don't really have a sense of how, would this be open to horses every day except for, during the wet season? I know you said that. How, would it be open to all of them? How often they would be using it? I don't know that it could become revegetated under these conditions, so that's a concern. And then there's also, I know that you mentioned, we in the past have dealt with similar projects by when I guess all towns are different, and we would consider a list of conditions like this to be more on the complicated side, and we would typically go to a notice of intent. And I know that there is perhaps some difference in the extent to which we, the commission, are able to enforce the conditions if it's a determination versus a notice, and maybe Carol can clarify.
Well, or Todd,
My preference right now would be to worry about how let's focus on the because the conditions are gonna be the same either way, right? Either, if we go notice of intent or we go RDA, the conditions, if we're gonna allow it, the conditions are gonna be the same. The only difference would be if we do the RDA, we're gonna condition it with the right to come back and the right to inspect. Because if they don't do those things, the conditions, then they're in violation of the permit, and you have the right to require they come back and file a notice of intent.
But didn't you tell me in the past that there was something about the,
Well, one of the differences, and again, I understand what Todd's saying, so maybe we have other questions and other things that we wanna move along to too, as far as the clock running, but the order of conditions gets recorded at the registry of deeds,
Okay.
and so that was one of the things I had said, is that, you know, the conditions run with the title, and so if you have continuing conditions, or if you have conditions that, that you need to enforce, you know, it's something that you are able to do it because it's part of that process. And that's, I think that's what I had said to you, is that the big difference is that it gets recorded. I'm not completely sure about the enforceability of conditions, it allows for them.
conditions on the negative?
Yeah, it allows for them, you know, under -3, it allows for them, there's no space really ever given on the -2, but it doesn't mean we couldn't add them and see how it works, but, I know I had at least one question that I felt that didn't get answered from the list of questions that we sent from the last meeting that when we were waiting to continue this, and that was really, in your memo that you sent us last week, you know, you said that Jennifer would give us a proposal on how to move the shed. And to me, that is a very simple proposal, you know, that you're gonna move it, but we have no idea how that's gonna be done. And so it's kind of been a month or more since that question was asked, and I don't necessarily feel that comfortable without having a better sense of how it's gonna be done, conditioning it. Like sometimes when we know the process, then there may be a condition that we would want to impose, you know, so I think that would be helpful if there's any sense of how that's gonna be done, that we discuss that before we talk about conditions.
Yeah, no, it's fair enough. Yeah, because she hadn't hired a company, presumably it'd be the same people who built the shed. It was unclear whether they would need to disassemble it and move it, slide it, and what I had said is that the company hired to move the shed will provide the commission with their work plan prior to commencing work. So
I know, I mean, it's about what, you thought it was like maybe 50 feet from the driveway?
the shed, about 50 feet from the
Do
driveway.
you think that's
Yeah,
right?
about right.
So, again, where it's, it has no foundation, but it has a bottom, right? I mean, so is it, I mean, I was there when they were building it, the day that the complaint came in, and they were building it, and I guess I got the impression from Jen, and maybe the impression was wrong, but that it could be pulled or moved and skidded.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering if that's how it might be done. Would it have to cross the stream? Would it be skidded on the side, you know, on the same side that it was put in on? I'm not positive how. Anyway, I think to have conditions, we kind of have to know that information.
I don't have an answer. I think we'd need the company to say how they would do that. And that's why I suggested that, that whoever she engages to move it, would provide you with their work plan. Other than that, you know, she would need to hire them, they need to come up with a plan, and give that to you. I know that the feeding stations, the troughs, can be carried by several individuals. Jen suggested that 4 people could pick those things up and move them. So those would be hand carried over, but the shed, I don't know.
They're over 1,000 pounds each, so it takes 4 very, very, very fit men to move those, or multiple. It would not be safe for, I mean, I can't even budget, so horses can't knock them over. So it's not a simple move. They're very, very solid structures, and you've all seen, most of you have all seen them.
I'm sorry, that's the trough you're talking about?
That's the hay feeders.
Thank you. So, can I ask another question?
Sure.
So last fall, it was seeded, and maybe, I don't know, again, I can't remember if you said what it was seeded with, but I'm not sure, what's the proposal to seed it with? And it sounded like it didn't have a lot of success, so what might be done differently to?
Yeah, so when we talked about this last October or November, I can't recall, it was the end of the growing season. I had suggested using one of the annual remember if it was wheat or rye, and then mulch it. And so Jen did find the appropriate seed, seeded it, covered it with hay mulch, but it was sort of like the end of the growing season. But the idea was to try to take that lower filter strip area, and the commission was somewhat divided about whether to require that or not. She just went ahead and initiated that plan. But it would, the idea would be, there was a temporary fencing put in place, and you would actually put a real fencing, permanent, safe fencing, and then it would get seeded with basically a pasture mix, so that what you want for these filter strips is just tall meadow grass. And normally they're mown once a year, but you basically want a tall grass. It's not gonna get mown, doesn't get grazed because it's fenced off, but it's just a tall vegetated meadow.
And so the soil's not so compacted or anything like that? I mean, I
No.
did read online, again, I don't know much about horses and paddocks, so, this is the reason for some of the questions. But it did say on one of the blogs that I was reading that it is difficult to revegetate a paddock, that they are hard to do. So I guess I just didn't know whether soil needed to be aerated in any way, or...
Yeah, no, the soil actually is quite good. I think getting back to the question about like, can you revegetate the stream and area, that's correct. Jen was not very confident that we could put the time and effort into seeding it and actually have it established. It's almost like if you have like a town soccer field, you seed it, you let it sit for a year or more before the kids can go play on it. It's really kind of incompatible to try to reseed, revegetate an area when horses are still using it because their hooves turn up the ground. Whereas the lower area, that'll vegetate very readily. It's very nice, well-drained soil. It's
So
not
when you were
compacted.
talking about it being difficult to revegetate a paddock, they meant one that continued in use as a
In
paddock.
use, that's correct. This lower filter strip, the seed that, the annual seed that was put down, we may start seeing that pop up this spring, but the idea would be to actually put a real seed, a meadow seeding in there.
Okay. This may be a very basic question too, I don't know horses either, but horses also can be on pasture where it stays green. Is it possible to convert a paddock to a pasture so that, is it just isn't it just a question of the density of horses, the amount of use? Could it be that the use of that area is limited so that it can be vegetated and be more of a pasture than a paddock is what they call a sacrifice area, right? It's not, you don't maintain green, it's just.
Yeah, I think the best way to answer this is to, I guess in limiting the use of this particular horse pasture, the areas available to the animals, if they need to use it, want to use it, space themselves out, but we're removing the requirement that they cross over this wetland, right? So right now you have this the shed for winter shelter. We've got the feeding station. So in a lot of ways, the horses are being encouraged to go to
I
get
understand
there.
that, but they're animals and they're going to want to move around, and of course. So while there'll be less incentive to go to the other side, it seems to me they're still going to do that. Not as often perhaps. And I'm just sort of wondering, like, to what level would the horse traffic have to be reduced for that area to remain vegetated somewhat, or to become revegetated, as opposed to the way it is now?
Yeah.
Do you know? Or
I don't think I know.
would Jen like to answer that, or do you have a sense, or no?
Yeah, I will tell you that the number of horses varies.
Yeah.
Animals are brought in from auction, they're sold, they're leased out. The number has varied between 1 horse and 9. Right, 9 right now. So there's 7 horses and 2 ponies on the site.
Okay.
That's what we're talking
In
about.
addition to the pigs and goats and all that.
They are. They're in separate enclosures. The average number of horses is typically 4 to 5, not 9. So I think just at the current time, you're seeing at higher the upper level or upper number of animals that are typically there. And so I guess our feeling is that in the overall use of these turnout areas, paddocks, the way the animals come and go, I think that you'll just see a reduced number of animals using that area, both with these measures that we're talking about and just the way her operation works. The animals do come and go, and I think you're seeing it at a higher level right now than normal.
Well, I think I would feel more comfortable with the conditioning and negative determination if we could somehow ensure that the traffic would be low enough so that it could be revegetated. I guess, are you saying, no, that's not possible?
I don't think that's realistic. So I think that if that were a condition, I'm not sure that the normal use could commit to that.
So are there, since the commission seems especially concerned with regrowth of some kind in that area, are there conditions other than density that you are proposing that would allow the revegetation?
There are, and if you look at number 8, Jen is able to manipulate where the horses go. So in the...
How?
So all the paddocks are interconnected. They're all fenced off. The horses can go in and out. And one of the things that we discussed is that, when this stream has flow in it, she said, well, I can just shut off those gates, and then the horses wouldn't go through a wet stream channel. They wouldn't be crossing a stream when there's water in it. She can do that. The most critical time for the use of that animals are the winter, and I think you would agree that that's not an impact in the wintertime to go through a frozen ground paddock. So she has more flexibility in the other times of the year when we're more likely to see overland water flow.
I'm just thinking about, why we want vegetation in particular areas, and one of them, of course, is to solidify an area and to stabilize it, to keep it from eroding. And presumably, if there are stream banks that are devegetated, that when there is rainfall and there's flow, that's going to erode that land and degrade the area. Is there any kind of protection against that happening if it's not revegetated?
I guess what I have to say is there's been no evidence to date that there has been a problem. I mean, this is clearly, I know you all have looked at this. This is clearly drainage that was purposely directed into this pasture in the past. I'm not going to argue the jurisdiction thing because in the end, we agree that this is a wetland up on the hillside that eventually drains the swale, even though it has no well-defined banks. It's an intermittent stream by regulations. But I guess there's been no evidence that there's been a problem on the site, off-site. When you look on the downstream side of her driveway, there's no sediment there. There's no drainage channel there, number one, which leads me to believe this is not a natural channel, because it wasn't like a natural stream that ran through there. So it was somehow created to better drain the farmland.
But like you said, it is jurisdictional. We have to consider it a wetland, and we have to consider the habitat quality too. And certainly when it's devegetated, it's far less valuable.
Yeah, so I guess I kept thinking that it seems like we're not even really, we're trying, right? But there may be other ways if the horses aren't on it as much during the summer when we're in the growing season, that there may be some other sections that can be cordoned off for periods of time, whether it's one growing season and one area is cordoned off to see if it can get revegetated, and the next growing season try to revegetate another one, or try to vegetate the intermittent stream. To me it seems like there's... You
mean sections within that,
paddock? Yeah, it seems like there could be a phased approach to it rather than it's not going to work approach. It seems like it could be something that could be considered, especially if there's a way to minimize the number in there in the summer because there's the other paddock and so forth. In the winter, as you said, it's gonna be either covered in snow or ice or frozen, and, for the most part, it's not growing anyway.
Yeah, no, and that's possible, Carol, and there is other turnout areas that the horses use. So when you come up the driveway, there's a very large wooded fenced-in area that's used in the summer. So there is a larger area in the summer than available in the winter. So it is possible to, direct the horses, out of that area. I just can't promise, given the way horses use land, that whole field can be completely vegetated. I don't wanna make commitments that the landowner can't achieve. So that's my reluctance to say, yeah, we'll revegetate it.
Sure, and it's not our job to prevent all activity within areas that are jurisdictional, but to ensure that people have considered all alternatives in whatever plan they come up with.
I think what's being proposed though, is to say with an average of 4 or 5 horses, there's no evidence, Mickey said, of sediment on the downstream side of this thing. There's no channel. The way I understand what Mickey's saying is that this operation has been as the way Jen has had it for 10 years. No impact at all. It's very flat. And this is what I was getting to at the beginning. Yeah, you have an area on this property that's within your jurisdiction, but the use that's being put to has no negative impact.
I have trouble accepting that. I don't agree that a completely devegetated stream is of no impact. I mean, and it is devegetated. How can that not have impact? It doesn't have any of the habitat value that it has when it's vegetated. I mean, streams need to be vegetated.
And the Wetlands Protection Act
Yeah.
says it has value. It's not whether we
Yeah,
say it has
yeah.
value. I know the two, responses to what you said is, I'm not aware of any reason why the time that it's been in this use matters, right? For better or for worse, it came to the commission's attention. So now the commission has to do it. The commission doesn't have a choice. And whether or not, if the resource is being degraded, it doesn't matter whether it's leaving the property or not. It became to the attention of the commission, so the commission has to do something. So that's why we're here. Not 'cause
Right, and I think we've put, I'm not disagreeing with you, sir.
And-
I think we're trying to do everything we can to meet the commission's
And I think it all seems to hang on the management issue, right?
Right.
So we want it to be managed so that it revegetates to some extent. And I think we're looking for a little more specificity on what that management will be. And I think, I was even just from the last couple of days of talking about it, right? We've talked about density, that's one issue. We've talked about seasonal use, right? We've talked about fencing off areas to allow areas to revegetate naturally.
We talked about fencing off the bottom half
We've,
permanently.
well, and that's mostly designed to
Not
keep
bottom half, the
things,
bottom piece.
that's mostly designed, if I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, to keep erosion from leaving the property, right? It's a barrier to it.
The
That would-
filter strip, the way Mickey
Right.
described it.
And that's a good thing. I mean, I'm not saying that is a good thing.
Right, it's an improvement.
But the commission where we seem to be hung up here is management for green.
So can I just give a time check? So it's 7:57, so, and I know, again, there's a lot of people, we did receive a lot of letters, emails rather, primarily, which I distributed. So I don't know if you have other commission questions, or whether, you wanna take any public input at this point, and you certainly will need some time to be able to make any decision tonight that you're gonna make, so.
Wonder if any of you wanna make any comments or share your thoughts or?
I have stayed from this one, I haven't been here for the whole process.
So, I'm about to overstep my bounds, I can feel it.
Go ahead.
But I think it would be fair to the applicant to know where you stand, because theoretically, if this side of the table is against it and you all are for it, they win tonight, right? So I think we do owe it to them to know where the commission stands generally.
Jim.
Including us?
Yeah.
Including us?
Yeah.
Oh,
Go around the
see,
table.
I thought I had spoken to some extent.
That's why I said this end of the table.
Okay.
Well, I'm inclined to balance the two against each other and say, you know, I know there is a lot of public good being created by the project, and there is a lot of movement in order to mitigate the impact that they're having on the resource. And I think we can reach a balance tonight where we can let that go forward.
Can you say what you would feel comfortable with? What do you think makes sense for an agreement? And what would you wanna add to the conditions to?
Well, I think that
Oh.
we have a little bit of time left, but I'm hopeful that we can do that.
Also,
So we
just
need
point
a-
out, once you close the hearing under your bylaw, you have 21 days to issue your determination or your decision, so.
So,
I don't think I've heard anything tonight that would keep me from going ahead with what I see
as is?
as is.
So you'd be willing to grant the relief, subject to these conditions as they've written?
Yes.
With no knowledge of whether this is gonna green up or not.
Well, we can never know for sure about anything, right? But we would have, one of the conditions could be that we need to see revegetation
Okay.
and we reserve the right to
But
go back.
that's not in the current, and you said you were comfortable without, I mean, that's what I wanna, I think we need to talk
That's
about what we require.
that's my current,
Okay, without revegetation, with
That's
nothing
my-
else added in there.
that's my current.
When they say they're going to, the only reason to manage it would be to manage it to reduce the impact. So
Yes.
it's hard to see what they would be managing for other than that.
That's right.
And we can spell it out a little bit. but-
Yeah, well, I
but-
think
yes.
if we want it in there,
Right.
if we care about that, then we need to spell it out, because it doesn't say that, I mean, it could still be
Okay,
completely
I think
brown.
those are details we can work out in the time we have remaining.
Okay, next, Liz.
I'm happy to see all these conditions spelled out very clearly. Some of the things we spoke about moving paddocks up in the, you know, we were going beyond the scope. I think there was a little bit of, we were talking about all kinds of things. I'm glad that is all off the table. I agree with Jim, I also agree with Janet, but given how our attorneys talked about the management, I think there were 4 items that were spelled out that tell me that we could come to a decision tonight, that this could eventually be vegetated, or a best effort attempt could be made, and that if we do the timing where we can, have site visits or, information, we get a report, maybe twice a year, a little bit more than the once a year, so that we know that it's happening. Monitoring could happen. I feel like a lot of effort has been made to bring both sides of the table to come to a decision.
Well, I think the proposal to move the shed sounds very good, but my concern is still with the proposed filter strip. I kind of agree with Janet that, we're kind of ignoring most of the swale, and you're just proposing that the bottom half to be vegetated. And I understand that, you say you can't fence it in, it's too restrictive. I wonder if there are other methods that we could look into besides fencing that could allow vegetation of the whole swale area and still have it used for horses. And so my concern is that, the bottom, doing the proposed filter at the bottom, I don't think is sufficient.
A lot of time, being out there, of course, seeing that paddock, I come down with Maria, it's that central intermittent stream, or the swale, that's gonna be very difficult to protect. Obviously, the right way would be to do the filter strip, set up a crossing, kind of fence those off, but just knowing the size of the paddock, it's really not workable. Like, it would cut off so much room from that actual paddock, and animals being animals, unless you do it perfectly right, it's gonna keep getting trampled down. I'd be interested to hear what kind of management plan we could put in place to try to mitigate that a bit. But I think, if we let it go forward, we end up kind of just losing that intermittent stream. I like everything in the proposal, the one we saw later. I mean, it seems like it's an honest attempt to mitigate the situation, pull stuff away from it as best as possible. You know, try to revegetate some area in order to just mitigate and reclaim. Like you said, I don't know how much it helps having the filter strip at the end. It doesn't hurt. It's definitely better than it was.
Yeah, it is, but it's just a portion of the swale. And I don't think we should be ignoring the rest of it. I mean, I understand that fencing may not work there because it is a tight area, but I've heard other suggestions such as some type of netting that can be put down around the banks. The horses could still kind of avoid that area and still possibly vegetate. I don't know if that's a workable solution, but have other solutions been looked at besides fencing?
Yeah, so like a erosion control fabric doesn't work with wildlife. It becomes just a trip hazard. So normally like a pasture, whether it's any kind of farm animals or wildlife, you try to avoid any kind of erosion control fabric. So I think, the types of solutions you've seen on like a subdivision or other projects don't really work with animals. So it becomes a safety issue for the animals. And so all your suggestions are good. You want more vegetation. It's just the way animals use land, it's just not always possible to get, the kind of 100% vegetation that I think you'd like to see there. So I think we're just trying to be realistic with what the expectations are.
Nice.
So I actually have a question. You talked about the population density as one of the sort of factors here that might contribute to whether or not there's green in that area. So you said we're at a maximum now of 9. Maybe you can give a little more detail, like on average, was that for a year, 4 to 5, a year, over how many years?
So what Janet said, it's fluctuated from a low of 1 horse. There's always been at least 1 horse there. The maximum that she's seeing is 9, which is what she has now, but over the years, it's averaged 4 to 5 horses. So right now, there's 7 horses, 2 ponies.
Yeah. So I think like everybody else, I really appreciate all the work that you guys put into this. It seems like there's a lot of concessions, and it definitely seems more workable than we've seen in previous meetings. I guess the one thing that I question, and I don't believe this is like the jurisdiction of the commission, but the population density, I guess I think, okay, we take the shed and move it outside of that area, and the horses don't feed over there, but if the population grows by 50%, I mean, now we're talking about probably the same amount of foot traffic in that area. So I feel we could probably come to I would come to some kind of comfort level tonight with the land management being kind of looked at a bit closer, but for me, the density of the area seems like a big question mark, because we never really talked about, where what the business plan for the property would look like a year from now or 5 years. And if it's just gonna continue to grow, I can imagine, the same amount of foot traffic as there is now, even though we're taking those things out. So I don't know if that's something we could maybe.
That's a fair question. It's a good point. We haven't talked about that. And Jen and I have talked about the issue of population density. And I think as far as her plan is, she can't maintain more than about 10 horses. So I don't know if you can put in that, this is normally something in the zoning planning, hours of use, numbers of whatever, but I think that the idea was that the property can sustain more than about 10 horses at any time. So
That's a little different of an issue, right? We don't care particularly how many she can support on the entire property. It's how many, what the density is in that area
Right,
that would
but
prohibit
what
regrowth.
he's giving us is some kind of assurance from a different kind of parameter.
You
It's
can write
unlikely to grow beyond
you
it.
could write that in. We're kind of reluctant, to provide a number because it's
If you're constrained
but
to the number we'd like to see anyway.
so that's you know, to answer your question, that's the real number.
Well, what about a simple condition that says, we leave it to your discretion, but it's gotta be green within a certain period of time?
Yes, that's what I'm most concerned about. I don't even wanna talk about like how many horses you should have, that's none of our business. It's, you know, you manage your horses however you want, but it has to be, you know, it has to be a certain amount of greenness around the stream. And if that means that you're gonna reduce to, you know, never have more than 4 or 5, that's, you know, that's your decision. It's, what we need to talk about is not how many horses she can keep, but how green can this paddock be?
Right, and if it's 20 horses in the winter,
Yeah.
cause it won't do any damage to prevent it from being green, then so be it, that's part of the management plan.
And how do you is there like a percent cover, is there
No,
a density?
well,
Is
maybe,
there-
I don't know. I don't really know how to do this, but I think what we're saying is we need some assurance that this is gonna revegetate, especially close to the stream. We haven't talked about how close, but I know that I feel I need some assurance, because I worry that we're going to make these, you know, conditions, and it might not make any difference. I mean, and I don't think that it's right unless we have some assurance that it will make a difference. That's where I'm at.
Maybe another way to put it is, would you just out of hand reject a condition that says it's gotta be revegetated within some period of time, however you decide to get there? Because if you would reject that, then maybe we're done, right? Because maybe that's the only thing that the commission could live with.
I think that, in my understanding of the horses and the operation and the cycling through the areas, I think that if you put a condition like that, I think you're setting Jen up for failure. Because the horses, as soon as they go in there, their hooves move the surface, they move the land. She can like seed it today, but we wouldn't necessarily have a green pasture. And I think that,
Well, why couldn't she have fewer horses if that's what it took? I mean, why
because she
does it-
needs that area. That's how her operation works. She uses the land, she's used that pasture for 10 years. The people before her used it, the people before them used it.
But
And so-
it was vegetated, please stop. It was vegetated
So
before,
there's-
we see that on the maps, it
Right.
was vegetated.
So there's different uses, that's right. And so at different times, it maybe becomes vegetated, maybe it will become completely vegetated. But I'm reluctant to guarantee that the way, you know, you're setting this up is that, you know, she has to vegetate it. And then what is her remedy then? If in a year you don't like the way it looks and it's not vegetated enough. It's a very odd way to treat a horse farm. So I think what we're trying to do is set up a situation where here we have to say minimize the use, minimize the horse traffic, minimize the use when it's wet, and hopefully it'll add more vegetation, but I don't know, I don't want to guarantee that.
Well, I don't know. For me personally, I need to see that in order to agree, but that may not be how you all feel.
So,
We are
it's,
over
yes,
time, yeah.
well, no, not quite over time,
Oh,
but
oh, we-
if you're gonna entertain any public, we have 4 minutes, and then we do have another meeting, we have a couple more meetings and public appointments, so.
Did you wanna have public input?
I think, yeah, you're supposed to ask the
You're
public
gonna have
for
to.
Okay.
any input.
All right, would anybody like to speak?
Wendy Hewitt, Avenue Hudson. I've attended a meeting of this commission and watched videos of proceedings regarding Totem Farm and Sanctuary. As you know, it's a working farm that benefits animals it rescues. The people who believe in, support, are educated, and are actively involved with the farm are volunteers. They volunteer to go to the farm as much as for the benefit of the horses, geese, pigs, bunnies, goats, etc., as they do for their own well-being and happiness, something you have to experience yourself to understand. What I do not understand is how a complaint on the location of a shed by a single butter has escalated to the point where, in a right to farm community, the topography of the land on which the farm is located seems to have become one of the most important delicate wetlands and conservation parcels in Bolton. When considering its past history of being a farm and housing horses for many years, and the fact that the wetlands consists of a man-made swale, it only seems reasonable that the town and commission could find some compromise that will allow the farm to continue its mission in a responsible manner in which it operates. The kind of scrutiny of one small farm that has been in operation for 10 years scares me. It scares me as a local residential property owner, as well as a landowner in the western part of the state. I often see homes with minimal acreage, some less than 1 acre, housing horses in small paddocks with run-in sheds. Horses on large farms standing in knee-deep mud and manure after snow and rain. Are those parcels in compliance with all regulations? Are those animals located in an area where there could be a swale? Or located where there could be endangered species? Maybe, but one would not know unless a neighbor filed a complaint, which subsequently allowed the commission access to their land. I fully understand the importance of conserving wetlands, replicating wetlands, managing forests with logging, and the resulting regeneration, protecting endangered and all species. But how does the unwillingness to compromise when the owner is offering solutions escalate to the point where a farm could be forced to shut down or relocate? I ask, when do the laws of the town and state become so rigid that a homeowner can lose his or her right to use their property in a manner under which the property was advertised, used by farmer owners for decades, and in which the current owner continues to use it in clean, organized, and community-oriented manner? What laws, nor outdated, allows a town or state to dictate how a resident of that town is allowed to use their property? It scares me. We live in a state and an area where farms are abundant. We see farms selling off their land to build houses, condos, industry every day. We see forests and orchards being cut down for housing developments. So in these times, when farms are struggling to remain viable, when property owners are dedicated to keeping their land, no matter how large or small, as a farm, as a sanctuary for animals, as a forest for wildlife, or as a place for people to obtain education, peace, and community service, it should be embraced, welcome change. Totem Farm and Sanctuary is one of those places which should be embraced as an asset to this right to farm voting community. Jen Vickery has offered many compromises and solutions. She's complied with the Commission's request to limit access to a portion of the paddock area, proposed adding a new paddock to reduce horse traffic in the swale area of concern, offered to enlarge the existing pond area. I asked the town, commission, and state, what would you do if you were in this seemingly impossible situation? Please help one small farm and sanctuary continue its mission and remain operational.
Thank you. Does anybody else like to speak?
Can I ask a question? In a prior meeting, I think, James, you had said maybe we can't limit the use of this paddock, so maybe we revegetate in exchange another location. Is that no longer, is vegetating something else? Why is it that the stream needs vegetation? Could you just have vegetation, really nice wetlands vegetation somewhere else? Would that meet your?
No.
That's because that's in one of the wetlands bylaws or whatever, it says you can do mitigation in a different area. Is that not?
Is there another area?
Is that not viable here to replace the missing vegetation in the paddock? Can we replace it somewhere else? I think James mentioned that in one of the earlier meetings as maybe an option.
If they can create an equivalent amount of wetland.
You mean it has to be a paddock with a swale running through it?
It doesn't have to be exactly the same.
Well, the act only allows you to alter a certain amount, right? So you'd have to, if the determination is that it's altering over 50 feet, then that's 25 feet on either side, or on an intermittent, I think it's 50 on one side, right? Then, then they'd still have to do further evaluation, so there'd be more information that would have to be provided.
Okay.
So mitigation is something that can sometimes be considered for alterations, like we have crossings for roads, and other things that occur, filling of wetlands, but then the mitigation has to be proposed.
Okay.
But similarly, if there's another portion of the stream on that property that has become devegetated, that they could revegetate, that would be the same amount to compensate for the.
Well, if it's devegetated, then that wouldn't be, first of all, I'm not sure that there's another portion other than in the paddock. It's devegetated because we've looked at the bordering vegetated wetland above it, and then below it, as Mickey said, it sort of opens out and disperses. It's not a defined channel.
I don't know if there is, but I remember there was, and this is probably the example that I used, there was an area where somebody wanted to build a garage that was gonna encroach on some buffer area. But we discovered that there was some buffer area that had become devegetated, that they would
Yeah.
revegetate to make up for that. So I don't know whether there's a similar area on this property that could be used in compensation.
Thank you
If
for,
there
thank you
is,
for clarifying that, because that,
Okay.
to me, that was a very confusing.
right, that's how it came up in that.
Somewhere that's devegetated
how it
already,
comes
that
up.
you would then vegetate.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I
Thank you.
just say one thing? I appreciate you reading your letter. We did receive all the letters. Carol forwarded them all to us, and we all read them. And I can, if I could speak for the whole commission, we all agree that this is a wonderful project. And so the beginning of your statement is something that we do all agree. We all visited, we all think it's a great mission. And so, if I could just ask, given the amount of time, that if you know, like, we don't need that part because we all think it's a good mission.
So if I could just.
Can you say who you are too? I'm sorry, and I didn't get your name, just for the
My name
record.
is Adrian Witty.
Adrian, and I'm sorry, and before you,
Michelle,
Michelle.
thank you.
Now, I just want to point out very briefly that you guys are actually very close, right? Because everybody has the same goals. And Jan and Nikki have committed to a plan that they believe will achieve those goals of responsible management of the area and hopefully reputation. And that's exactly what you guys want to see. So really, the only difference between your positions is what would be the wording of the restriction, the commitment that would have to be made. Are you willing to agree to a plan that is doing all the right things that should lead to revegetation? Or are you going to say the plan, we will only accept the condition that revegetation must actually happen, which is in fact asking them to kind of be responsible for nature in a sense. And so all I'm saying is I think what I would like to see is that you would recognize that the plan that they put in place is a highly responsible plan that has every prospect of leading to vegetation. Now, after all, if that area was vegetated in the past, which I've looked at the pictures, it's actually quite hard to tell from those early satellite pictures, but let's assume it was, then the implication is that in this kind of use, vegetation there can occur. So there's every possibility that by the steps that they propose, revegetation will happen. So the question is, can you accept that plan in the interests of the greater good of the town and the community? Or are you going to stand on principle and say, just that last thing, unless you can guarantee that revegetation will occur, we don't believe your plan is worthy. And so I'd just like you to ask you to kind of balance those things and see if you can bridge that millimeter difference between your positions in the interest of the greater good of the community. Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak? All right.
Can I just say one thing? Being in an agricultural environment, there is a thing as crop rotation, which your crop is the horses. And not seeing this, I'm just speaking blindly, but with the maintenance, is there any way to crop rotate it? And someone had said, you obviously know the worst times of the year, so you don't have as many horses that time of the year. You eliminate a section of the paddock. Maybe they do cross the stream in an area during the worst time, but a section isn't. It will come back. I mean, we all know it'll come back. We've seen areas that have been disturbed. Eventually it will come
Vegetation
back.
comes through pavement, right?
It will. It comes to where you don't think it grows in trees. You wonder how it gets there. And do a year and see where we're at in a year's time. If it's not working, then revisit the situation. You have a year to work it out. It's a learning experience for everybody here. And
Well, they should have a plan
this
to work it out.
Right.
And
This is a very good plan, and as they're going along, if it's not working,
Well,
readdress it.
I said that there should be a management plan
Right.
that describes what their plan to manage that process is. And I also submit that with the provision that plan be prepared, that would complement the conditions of it
And
before
this
today.
some time before growing season starts. We have 4 feet of snow out there, and it's not going away very soon. Maybe this hits the middle of the road, gives you a year to, You know, you've been blindsided, and this is a learning curve for everybody else on this side. You know, if you come back in a year's time and it's not working, then address it. You know, maybe at that point a notice of intent is suitable, but it gives you time to research, see this isn't working, I've tried it, I can do this now.
Is it time for a motion?
Well, how do you, well,
Yes.
I mean, are we going, just on this, or are we gonna add in?
Well, it depends
With-
on,
Well, you can
On-
put that in, you
on
can
the
put that in your
motion.
motion, we can have
Motion to-
discussion on it, so.
To have, you know, a management plan come forward, you know, working with the commission.
So under your bylaws, under your determinations, you close the meeting when you have sufficient information to review and issue a decision. And then, you know, according to the bylaw, you have 21 days. If you close the meeting tonight, you have 21 days to issue whatever that decision is.
But under the act, we have to,
The act, you had 21 days from the date of filing, but we've given you extensions all along.
right, so we'd either need to get an extension or,
Yeah.
you know.
I'm sorry, so.
So Mickey's saying that we can close the hearing or the public meeting under the bylaw and still take 21 days before we issue our decision, which you could do at your next meeting. But under the act, they would need to grant an extension. So either we can do that now, as Jim was gonna make a motion to do whatever, or, you know, which might be to close the meeting and to, you know, discuss issuing something, or whether it's a positive or a negative determination, whatever. So, but Mickey's just saying, you know, again, they could give an extension if we wanted to get, to the point of being able to work out conditions.
I'd like to say something, if that's okay.
Sure.
I want to make sure that you all realize the well-being of my animals is very, very important, as well as the well-being of everyone who volunteers at my farm. What you determine affects whether or not it can stay in this community. When you talk about shutting off fences and limiting that, what you're asking for is my animals to not be able to interact with each other. You're creating boredom and stress-related behaviors in my animals. You are putting my animals at risk for colic because they lose the opportunity to move through these turnouts. So you're putting their mental health and their physical health at risk. I've been a happy resident of the town of Bolton for 10 years. I've never had a conflict with anyone in this community. I'm a tax-paying citizen. I do good for the community all the time. What I want you all to realize, what is happening here is financially breaking me. This is thousands and thousands of dollars. And you are forcing me out of my home and having me choose between my home and my animals and what I do. So I hope that you take that into account. And what a horrible situation that this is, to choose between something you've worked for your whole life and the animals you've promised sanctuary to in the community that really all of these people and many, many more gained from this property, and choose between moving. It took me 4 or 5 years to find this property. I chose this town because it was a right to farm community, because this was a horse property and it would give me the opportunity to have my dream. You are forcing me out of my home. You are financially hurting me and my sanctuary and everybody in it. And I just want to make sure you all understand this is not a game. There are very serious repercussions in this that you are not fully understanding.
The bottom line is that, though it's emotional, that's the truth. That's exactly what you people are doing. You people in this community are doing this to another person in this community. Think about that.
This is why
Think-
I'm
think-
saying that this
think
is a
about
learning
it.
curve, and it's, you've been blindsided. You bought a piece of property that you felt was
10 years ago.
right. And I understand that. And like I said, I've never been on your property, but I am fully aware of your agricultural desirement. So it's a learning for you on what the agricultural requirements are also. But you should be able to move things, I'm saying agriculture as far as the state is concerned. There's a whole different level when you go into that. And this is why I'm proposing a year almost probation of, and it's not, and it's for you to learn and to get.
She is not a criminal.
No, maybe that was the wrong word.
That wasn't the right word.
Maybe it's the wrong word, I'm just saying.
A trial
It's a trial to see what will work, what won't work. You know, when's a good time to have, and I I know horses come up and you have to pull them in, you have to pull them in, understandably, because they're gonna be put down or whatever.
We're not even talking about additional horses, we're talking about the animals I
Right.
have.
No, and I understand you need space to do things.
They
And
need space to be mentally and physically safe.
Right.
Taking away that space means there is no farm.
And I'm not saying to take away space, I'm just saying to
There are
move
animals in that
space,
space.
depending on time of year.
Considering these aspects, I would like to propose a motion if I could. And my proposal is that we find a negative determination for the RDA for horse shelter on the basis of the 9 conditions that have been proposed in Mickey's memo, with the addition of submission to us of a plan for management of the area before our next meeting that would encourage vegetation of the area. And I use those words carefully. That is a goal. These are all goals. These are all goals for the public good that we should all work towards. And it's working towards them that I would like to see us do. So that is the motion that I would like to propose.
A second. And I abstain, though, but I agree with you.
But it's more than just the management plan, right? I think we had other questions like how the shed was gonna be moved. Was that, did we want more specifics on how that was gonna be done?
Yes, I recommended
So it's
that.
not just the management plan.
Would you like to amend the motion to include that such questions be answered? And those questions in specific?
Was there other information besides that?
Well, can I just say, I think asking them to have that information by the next meeting, where we've asked for that kind of stuff all along, is putting it a little bit short. You know, I think if you really want them to come up with a plan, that's gonna be something, they're gonna need to maybe talk to other resources. Again, they reached out to NRCS, you know, maybe they need to talk to other horse farmers, you know, on the town or elsewhere, you know, to come up with some other ideas. Maybe they need to look into some other kind of sediment control measures, you know, some things that are faster action, vegetation in a paddock. I mean, there's all kinds of things that people could look at, which I don't think we are in the position to want to dictate, but I do think next meeting is a little short for them to come up with that plan.
Point taken.
So,
Is there a better time frame? That would still enable us to make a determination that you
Well,
suggest?
in addition to, I mean, I guess I would think that you would want to have some conditions that you haven't talked about, even though Mickey's alluded to them a little bit, about, you know, having site visits and about having information reports or something generated to you. And, you know, some of the typical kinds of conditions that you would normally have on a revegetation and a construction-related project. So I guess I would just suggest that you think about adding some of those. I've thrown some of them out to you, you know, in the past, so. I mean, I think if you wanted to get a plan in, you know, in time for you to have a chance to review it, you know, getting it by next meeting is just short. So, I mean, I would certainly think sometime, I mean, I think they need to have a plan before the snow melts, basically, right? But
At some point, it sounds like if we add this many conditions, what we're essentially doing is coming up with a positive determination and an order of conditions.
well, and that's
That's a
the way we
different,
could go.
that's a different, yes, that's a different finding,
And that is
and it's
typically-
not what I'm proposing.
Right, and that is, but I'll say that it is what we've typically done with horse properties. That's been the convention for the past 3 of them, that we've gone the notice of intent.
So,
That may
so
be
Jim,
true.
if we could, can I just look at these then? So if you were to look at, so moving the shed, moving these things, moving the troughs, permanently fencing the bottom, you know, there's no time frames. You would be good if this is done in 3 years? That's when the determination's good for?
Now we get into the
I'm just
difference-
asking a question.
Well, if we have, clearly if we have a positive determination and a set of, and an order of conditions, we can make the conditions work.
No, but with your, with your motion,
But and this may be a question for town council, if we make a negative determination, how much authority do we have to attach specific conditions like that?
I think you can attach because what you're saying is that there is no impact if the conditions are followed. Therefore, if the conditions are not followed, then there is an impact and they need to file a notice of intent.
You always have the capability of coming back.
If they don't,
If we don't,
if the conditions are not
Right.
satisfied.
Right, and that's why I'm saying, work with the property owner to make the conditions, so we don't have to go to that next level, is what I'm
Does
suggesting.
this mean that we perhaps need a little further negotiation on the specifics of the conditions so that they are determinable?
What I think the gentleman in the back put his finger right on. The question is going to be whether we're requiring an outcome, right, green, or whether what they're
Just an
proposing
effort.
is an effort to make it green. And that's up for you all to decide, but I think that's where you're either gonna require them to get to an effort, or it's gonna be green. Because if it doesn't become green, then you might say, well, then that's a failure of the condition, now we wanna look at, reopen this up as a notice of intent.
I think
That's a good
if there is an effort, the plan should be very clear in how that effort is undertaken, and that, because if it can't be revegetated, then it can't. But it seems like nature will revegetate anything if you give it the time, the space, the water, and leave it alone enough. And if you rotate in and out, or, you know, whatever the plan says that allows it to revegetate. So the condition would include this plan that's very clear with dates. And then, you know, halfway through, at some point, not a whole year, you know, as you're saying, we work with Jen, and we figure this out. We get it vegetated if it's possible. It looks like it's possible, but only time will tell.
So the requirement is that there be a plan to move towards revegetation, not a requirement that they achieve it. I'll go for that. Do we have anything solid enough to actually vote on?
Well, if there's a plan and it's followed, then it should be revegetated, because there's nothing that says that it wouldn't vegetate if the horses aren't going in and out of it.
But if you're not requiring to be revegetated, it will never have to be. I mean, they won't have to come up with a plan that actually works.
That's what we're saying. We're not saying that it ever has to be. We're saying that they make their best effort.
Right, I
Now,
understand that.
if we're to do that, then we should have a plan to look at as part of the conditions here,
Yeah,
that lay out the best efforts that they intend to make.
yeah. You can make that motion. I mean,
I would like to
Well, Rachel,
incorporate that into the motion.
can I just also say that usually when you have that kind of a condition, right, it's a plan that's found acceptable to the commission after review.
Indeed.
So, you know, it'd be something that you're gonna have the opportunity to review and find that it's acceptable, and if not, again, if you don't find it acceptable, then it moves to the next stage.
Yes. So let it be proposed. Now, there should be a time frame by which that plan must be available for our consideration.
So we have 2 meetings in March, 2 meetings in April, meetings in May. I just think the next meeting's a little short to try to get something together. If you wanna have something by the middle of March, so you could review it at the beginning of April. You have a meeting March 3rd, and you have a meeting March 17th.
I think that would work for me. Would it work for the people who would have to prepare it?
Well, you're the ones making the conditions at this point, so
Right.
you
Don't want
you
to
gotta move it
impose a
along.
condition that's unreasonable.
Right.
When we're, going in that direction, it seems like movement of the shed would be in the mud season unless it's going to happen the next dry season, right?
Well, I think we're asking for information on the moving of the shed too. That's, sounds like what we still need for that to be determined. But, I mean, you could say, so you could have a condition that, that, you know, a plan as to how they're going to move the shed be submitted no later than March 15th. And then you can review that at your first meeting in April. And, or the March 17th is, I don't know, let's see, that's not enough time, the 17th is the
Stipulate that
meeting.
it's moved in either frozen grounds or.
Yeah, I mean, it's up to them to come up with how they're gonna do, and we can find whether it's acceptable, right? I mean, if it's being dismantled, it might be able to be removed, you know, moved in any time. If it's being tracked, it might be better to do it in the frozen ground conditions. If it's not being, you know, if they say they wanna track it in the middle of the mud season, then you might not find it acceptable, right? I mean, you could have a condition that says that unless it's further, you know, frozen ground conditions, you know, it's not gonna, you're not gonna find it, can be moved
Yeah,
across the stream.
they could propose the plan earlier if they came up with it earlier, like to make sure that.
Yeah, no later than, so you could say no later than March
Right.
15th.
Right, so if they wanted to make sure that it happened during frozen conditions, they could make the proposal during frozen conditions and then move it.
And, I mean, they've already said, you know, that they'd be willing to have inspections. You know, I think, as I said, I still think that one of the things that you typically get are photographs. You know, people send, it's easy enough for somebody to take photographs and tell you what, you know, how progress is being made. Until you get, I mean, that could be part of their plan. You know, you could say, you know, as part of the plan, we want there to be monitoring, we want there to be photographs, we, you know, want certain things in it.
Do you wanna make a motion?
I have.
We have a
I think it's a motion and a second. I think,
What are you gonna put on your?
I just think procedure, I think, you know, what I have on the motion is with conditions, including the management plan to promote vegetation, and then everything that you said would, I think, go fit under that. The only thing was that I heard there was this amendment that hadn't been seconded about incorporating moving the shed, but maybe that's part of the management plan, I don't know.
Well, I do think we need to restate the motion for the
Yeah,
benefit of
yeah.
everybody.
Okay, see if I can remember.
Well, Jim, what you had said was a motion to find a negative determination for the shelter on the basis of the 9 conditions and the addition of a plan for management before the next meeting that will encourage vegetation of the area. And Lori seconded that. And then we were having discussion.
Yes, and so in addition, we would like also to require that there be a description of how the shed would be moved,
Acceptable to the commission.
acceptable to the commission. It's not unusual for Carol to help word these things. Are there any other points which we'd like to include?
Do we need a time frame for these 9 things here? I think Carol, you mentioned
Right.
that.
Well, I know Jen said that they're really heavy. Again, I have no idea how they're done, so I don't know, you know, she has to gather people to help, or whether it's a piece of equipment or whatever. So again, maybe it's just that it's done within, again, it's just, if she's not gonna have the horses on the paddock in the mud season, then, you know, it's done during either frozen or dry conditions, just so that it doesn't impact the stream.
They said we would minimize the use of the horses in the tournament, in that season.
Oh, so that they will still be maybe used.
It's in the paper that you have in front of you, Carol.
Yeah, and many of these, or at least several of them, aren't subject to time limit, time specification anyway. Like
We can
number
set
6 and 7. for instance.
If you want the management plan, if that's something the commission wants, we'll probably have some timeframes attached to that,
Okay.
including, maybe it'd be enough time to speak to the construction company when, you know, they think they should move the shed, when they're available to move the shed, not just the methods, but find out some dates. So I think part of that can include, the management plan can include some specific dates, so you know what the timeline is.
Yes, and we can come to some kind of resolution. of these
Did March
matters.
15th seem reasonable?
Yeah, I think that sounds reasonable.
perhaps Carol can review
Well,
this.
look, I didn't get it all necessarily, that depends, so you're also requiring a description of how they're gonna move the shed that's acceptable to the commission and a timeframe. And that the management plan will include, timeframes, dates for when the work will take place and how, and then that's all I have, and we'll have the management plan by March 15th. So I guess the other thing would just be, is there other stuff in the management plan you wanna be clear about that you would like to make sure it's in there, or you think based on the discussion, everyone's got that pretty much?
I think it's well understood.
Okay.
Do we need to re-second the motion?
I guess it doesn't hurt. I would probably have Lori, since she's abstaining, not do it necessarily.
I'll second.
Okay.
Is there a need for further discussion, or shall we vote? All in favor? All opposed? The motion carries.
Do you want something in writing, Carol, on continuing dates, or how do you wanna handle that?
I think I'm gonna try to get it out tomorrow, because
Okay.
I'm on vacation for a week,
Okay.
Thursday, so
Just
I
get it
think
done.
we're just gonna get it out. I think I'll get
Okay.
as much as everybody
So
said.
verbally, you have the
Okay,
continuation under,
okay,
by
so I
the
have to get
applicant
it.
for the
Okay.
regulations to do that.
To get it out.
Issue
It's,
that.
yeah, I'm not gonna be able to
Okay.
type it out tonight.
Okay, understood.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. You good?
I'm Jordan. Oh, hi, Jordan. Oh, thanks for coming.
Were you here in the background?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we've been getting a lot of emails as well.
Actually, I saw one.
The rep wanted me to-
It's the same street, we'll do that.
Thank you so much.
Make sure we get it, you know.
I emailed very much.
Yes, I saw it. Thanks.
We'll be able to do what we need to do. Oh, okay. Thank you guys for coming through a lot. Your hard work. I don't know if you can hear it through the electric. Tell how many people come in one way or another. I can't really tell if anybody was here for the electric bill hearing. So hopefully, a public meeting. Are you here for Mass Electric? Oh, you're Mike. We're running a little behind. We have two other hearings before. Entertain your requests. Thank you for coming. Oh, you just started. Okay, so I'm not sure who's here for the I know somebody's here for the next hearing.
Find out what they need to do.
Okay, you can just have a seat.
Healthcare stuff.
Are you here for Mass Electric? Huh? Are you
Yes.
here for Mass Electric?
Yes.
I just found out.
So Jean-
Sorry, I was waiting for the crowd to leave.
Yeah, I didn't recognize whether anybody was here for that or not.
My son, who's not 26 yet. he's-
Sorry, we don't have an easel.
It's okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
I'm sorry about that. I wish I had even saw it. I didn't know. But they sent some emails. I didn't know if they were gonna come.
Full screen, yes.
And the trust me too. Yeah.
Okay. I saw them. Oh, free to call. Probably, yeah. I know people love their faces.
So I'll leave them at the same. Okay, we got Mass Electric, right?
It's an additional map.
That's new?
Yes.
Eight thirty, they're just not in order?
Yeah, I guess that one, I don't know why it is.
Okay, sorry about that.
It's okay.
All right, the Bolton Conservation Commission will hold a public meeting under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, Wetlands Protection Act and Riverfront Act, and under the Bolton Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider a request for determination of applicability filed by Mass Electric for the installation of a new utility pole on Ballville Road within the right-of-way near map 3A, parcel 56. Public meeting will be held Tuesday, February 3rd, 2015 at 8:15 in the Houghton Building, 697 Main Street.
Hello, my name is Alexandra Echandi. I'm here on behalf of Massachusetts Electric Company.
Oh, sorry, are you with BSC?
I am,
Okay, and
yes.
so what was the last name?
Echandi, ECHANDI.
Okay.
Yes. So I'm here with BSC Group on behalf of the Massachusetts Electric Company, presenting on a request for negative determination for the installation of 3 utility poles. So I added, in the map, you have 2 additional utility poles that came to our attention, which are also part of this request of determination of applicability. These utilities poles are also within the road right-of-way from the road layout, so there are no additional overall changes in terms of the filing. The first utility pole that Massachusetts Electric Company is proposing is utility pole number 1584, which is on the side of Ballville Road, within the 10-foot edge of Ballville Road. It's also within 40 feet of a boarding vegetated wetland and within 70 feet of the bank of a river. So this is within the 200-foot riverfront area. However, the new additions to the wetlands...
I'm sorry, I missed some of the dimensions, and it
it's
wasn't in
okay.
that, you didn't say that some of the dimensions in the application, so what was that again, the distances?
Sure, it's 40 feet from the BBW,
Okay.
from the edge of the BBW, 70 feet from the bank of the river. So
I
the
think you
perennial
had
stream,
that in there.
yeah,
Okay.
perennial stream. So within the 200-foot riverfront area.
Is this the same, done for the same reason that we recently read about proposals to the selectmen to add 3-phase support, which require new poles to be?
This is part of a newer refurbishment project that Mass Electric Company is proposing within Bolton and Clinton. And it's because they have to string new conductors, and the conductors are way too heavy for the existing utility poles to be able to carry the weight. So they have to add a series of utility poles, and then they're also replacing some of the utility poles that are in place at the moment.
Now, I live on South Bolton Road, where they've added some new poles right next to the old poles. And they got these beautiful new poles, and they kept the old one too.
I don't know,
Is that the intent here?
No, the intent here is to, the specific one that I'm presenting on right now, that's a new pole all completely. Right now, one of the guy wires is being connected to a tree, so this is gonna be a new utility post to be able to hold the weight of the conductor cable.
So does the guy wire continue to stay
The
connected?
guy wire, no, will be connected to the utility pole
So,
itself.
is that just cut?
Well, the entire conductor string is gonna be replaced on the entire utility
So
line.
the one that's there now that goes into the tree, what
Exactly,
happens
it
with the
gets cut and
tree?
gets put, no, the wire gets cut and gets.
They leave whatever
put-
the mechanics are
Yes.
in the tree?
Yeah. And so this one, under the new revisions of the Wetlands Protection Act, because it's going to be installed within 10 feet of the paved road, and is further than 10 feet from a BBW, it's actually exempt from the Wetlands Protection Act. However, it's not exempt from the Bolton Conservation Commission bylaw, so we're here presenting this one in that regard. And then the 2 additional poles that I provided maps for, that you didn't have before in the filing, are actually on Wattaquatic Hill Road. And these are...
So, I guess I have a little bit of trouble that we didn't have that information for the public legal notice that there were poles on Wattaquatic.
And it's up to you in terms of how you want to proceed. Usually because it's a request of determination, it's on the side of the road. We didn't see that it was that big of a change in terms of the filing.
But just the
However,
public notice, I mean, people who might have cared,
Mhm.
don't have any clue.
And that's up to the Conservation Commission and how you wanna deal with it in terms of your bylaws. So for purposes of the Wattacotic Hill Road poles, so these are 7150 and 7050, these are 2 additional poles. These are actually also gonna be within the 10 foot of the road layout, but they're gonna be closer to an existing BBW, so they're actually within 10 feet of the BBW. If you have been to the area, there are existing utility poles right there, so what happens is the road.
Well, we've never been there because we don't know where it is. Where about on Wattacotic?
Yes, that's gonna be my next question.
So I would say east of Sawyer Road.
Now, let's see, as you leave Main Street, it goes uphill, and then it goes downhill.
Mm-hmm.
Which side is it?
It's on the downhill side, so Sawyer Road's past Old Bay.
Yeah.
You know, so you go up the hill at Old Bay, and then you keep
Crest-
going, and then
Crest-
West Berlin, and then it crests and it goes down,
Oh.
and then there's Sawyer. So it's between Sawyer Road and Ballville Road,
This is coming from 117, right?
right?
Yes.
That's going to-
And you have BBW on both sides of
Yeah,
Wattacotic
right,
Road
yeah,
at that
yeah,
point. It's actually Red Maple
So it
Swamp.
goes up and this is down.
But what happens is the road, the edge of the road layout is the beginning of the BBW. It kind of drops in the slant of the road, so the road ends into the BBW. And so what we're proposing is to install the utility poles right in the same line as the existing utility poles, which is within the 10 feet of the side of the road, or the road layout itself. So it's in line with the guardrail. I actually have pictures.
So wait, it's not past the guardrail, it's in front of the guardrail?
It's in line with the guardrail.
Oh, so the guardrail's not there, okay. Are you
Now-
submitting the pictures too?
I can submit the pictures too, so
Yeah,
this
if
is
you
just an example.
present it, then
Yes,
usually you
sure.
should submit it.
Why is there one on the other side that's new? So
Where?
This one here?
No,
Those are-
oh, actually, yeah, I didn't see that one.
Yeah,
That one
those
and
are-
the one and that one,
those
yeah.
are the
Yeah,
two.
those are not within the jurisdiction
Yeah.
of the Wetlands
Oh,
yeah.
Conservation
Yeah.
Commission, review, so
Right,
there
I-
are a series of additional poles that are gonna be installed and replaced, however,
Right.
because they're not within the jurisdiction, we don't present on them.
Right, so
Yes.
so I see that you have the BBWs in the
Yes.
circle, I understand that, but
Yes.
maybe this is just from my general knowledge. But why do you have just one? Aren't they all connected?
They are, it might have been because there was no space on one side, I mean, I'm not
Oh, okay, so you just
an
connect
engineer,
across the.
exactly, so it
okay.
connects across and then
They
it jumps over once
Minimizing
again.
the span, this is coming up with town meeting the other night, talking about some of the other poles, they're minimizing some of the spans are probably gonna increase, apparently the load on there is a little too heavy right now, so they're
Oh, you put one across the
increasing poles
street.
to minimize the span, but it was a whole fun process with the old poles to hear how it needs to, who needs to approve the pole, and I forget, like, you guys need to switch, and Comcast needs to switch, and Verizon needs to switch, and they all need to check back and forth, and then somebody else has to remove the pole.
Mhm.
Well, that's if they do that instead of the thing we did on our road.
Yeah, but that was a proposal for it, was that the load was
So
too
Brian,
much
you're
as
saying
it
that
was now.
the poll hearings that the selectmen were having were
Yeah.
for all of these other polls? Because I only think I saw like 9 polls
There
or
were,
something.
it was groupings of poles, and it was starting to go down Wattaquatic, and I'm trying to think if these were included, I was trying to picture how far it went, they were kind of starting to move down the road. I wanna say they only got up to Old Bay.
Oh, so
There
they'll
was
be
3
having
somewhere
further
else, there's
hearings.
3 on Wattaquatic, 2 more on Wattaquatic, and then like 1 on the corner of Old Bay, so it was
Mhm.
almost from 117 to Old Bay, they were looking for approval
Yeah.
for, and then it'll go further than,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like it's already going further.
Question I have is, are there alternatives? Are there different poles that you could use that would allow greater spans, for instance? So
They
that
would
you
have
could-
additional impact,
No,
so
that could be
the,
outside the resource area. I think, right, that's what you're,
they,
yeah.
and that's something that they looked at in the alternatives analysis that they have presenting, is they looked at the possibility of putting it across the street. However, the span was way too far for the poles to be able to carry the weight of the conductors that they wanna, restring some of the utility lines with.
Unless you used a much bigger, stronger pole.
Exactly, yes. I mean, the impact that we're talking about it here is 2 square feet of impact on the side of the road, within the road layout, so.
So there's no new tree cutting that
There's
has to
no new
happen
vegetation
associated with the
management.
wires?
No. Oh, that's not part of this presentation. This presentation is just the structures themselves.
So they're gonna file with the wires?
If
About the-
it's maintenance,
Wouldn't be maintenance if they don't have wires.
well, they currently have wires.
But
They're
if they're making
restringing.
new poles and
Could be higher.
relocating them, they'd be maybe cutting other, I guess I'm just thinking they're cutting other vegetation.
The wires will be higher.
No, the wires are gonna be the same height, they're just replacing in-kind poles. And so in terms of the maintenance, so long as they're replacing in-kind poles and they're within the utility line, I mean, the addition of 2 poles, there's already 2 poles in place on the line.
Okay, I'm sorry, you were jumping around from going across the street and so forth,
Oh,
so I
that was for
thinking-
the alternative analysis in terms of, have they looked at options?
Okay, so we didn't get an alternative analysis, right? You didn't submit that?
This wasn't an NOI, so we didn't have an alternative analysis?
So under our bylaw, we look for that stuff.
Okay, all right. So in terms of how they go about doing this, is they literally would access the site from the road, dig the hole, put the pole in, it's a direct embed structure. They would put in erosion control structures all around each new utility pole. There's not gonna be any exposed soil. All the soil that's dug out is put back in place and everything is graded and restored back to pre-existing conditions.
So in your application, you gave like 7 or 9 types of BMPs that could be used. What's the proposal?
So the proposal is they will always use erosion control structures if they're within the wetland. So in these locations, they're definitely gonna be using erosion control structures. If for some reason during the digging, they find water within the hole, they need to be water to be able to put the structure, so they will follow their dewatering BMPs.
Okay, but
And-
so, like, there's, you had sediment fencing, you had, the filter socks, and hay bales or
Yeah,
stir
so in
bales.
terms of-
So how do we know which one's being utilized?
If you have a preference in terms of which one you want them to utilize, they can utilize them. These are all tools that they have in their kit. They always use whatever the Conservation Commission has a preference with, whether it be filter socks or wattles or hay bales or straw bales. Typically, they use wattles, but if some conservation commissions don't agree with wattles or they would like to see hay bales, they can definitely put hay bales down.
Yeah, I don't know any of the sites, so I don't have a recommendation for you. I don't know if you wanna look at them.
There are a lot to look at.
Well, they're under
Well, there's 3
3 feet
that are
of
under
snow
the-
right now.
And,
Yeah, that's true.
When is the work
Yeah, when
proposed
would they
for?
put it?
as soon as the snow is gone.
And if you don't put it in,
June.
Before lots of
July.
Yeah.
they have to be put in, basically, but there's no alternative plan that was submitted.
But in terms of the impact, if you look at the impact, then we're talking about 2 square feet of impact on the edge of the road. So we're not talking about any new disturbances to the wetland area. We're talking about, edge of road work.
After letting the
With
stream go in the
access.
last case, we shouldn't really get about any of this.
No, it just doesn't seem like the information was really provided. I guess I feel like, I mean, I have to say, somebody from BSC came in last summer, and was talking about all this work. So to me, it's surprising to get 2 new things, even though they're small, amount of work. I mean, the other one seemed pretty straightforward, but now I don't know this I haven't.
And I'm concerned about the Bay Road, or the first map that you showed.
Oh, Ballville Road.
Yeah, where people were not, there's no notice for that.
No, well, there was for Ballville, it wasn't for
Oh,
Waterquatic.
Waterquatic, okay. So,
Do the people who live along the road get the benefit of the additional service, or is it going to some other place?
I do not know the answer to that question. However, this
You know?
is within the right-of-way of the road and the utility company, so it's not like it's interfering with anybody's private property.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, just,
Right. Well,
Curious.
unless it goes in front of somebody's house.
Yeah.
Which was a big one from the meeting the other night. I would tend to agree with Maria, just that there was a lot of interest in the poles on Waterquatic Hill Road. There was a lot of venting relatively, a lot of what people had to say may or may not have been germane. There might not be anything it can really have anything to do with. But I'd hate to have a discussion on poles on Waterquatic without opening it up to the public, just because it was literally a packed house, like we were in the hallway.
okay, you
It
got
was-
a newspaper article.
Yeah, this was.
This was last Thursday.
Yeah, last Thursday.
Yeah,
Or the
right.
Thursday before, maybe.
Right,
Can't
right,
remember.
but,
So
at
that was
town
last
hall, but
meeting.
like literally, I mean, it
Oh.
was a packed house, you can breathe in there.
Most
Which
people
threw
were
me,
there.
I wanted to hear about some other things.
Most
that I was
people were there for
yeah.
that topic.
We're there for that topic, yeah.
Because of the other poles not being taken out?
But that was a
just-
big part of it. Actually, somebody counted and I don't wanna take up any more time, but it was from 117 to Old Bay, there was like 48 poles. Like, it's a number that would, like, when you hear it, you're like, that can't be true. And it's like, it's an eighth of a mile, it's got 48 poles, and people were really, like, put the new ones in to take the load, like, which ones are you gonna take out, and how many years do they stay before you take them out?
Well, if we wanted
And
to,
why are we putting-
consider adding this as part of the request for determination, I mean, one option would be to say that we wanna continue it and have them do a legal notice to whatever the continued meeting is. We'd give you time to take a look at the location of the new ones they're presenting, and see if you feel like there's, if you couldn't even tell, I mean, she's saying it's dropping off, that's why I'm wondering about what BMP is being proposed, and maybe we can't tell with the snow, but maybe you can think about what would be the best one for that location. And it wasn't clear to me that we were gonna pick one, I mean, it was all in the application, so I didn't know what we were doing with them,
Just
to be
because,
honest.
like I said, they're all options that National Grid has, so they use whatever is most appropriate for the site. In this case, it does drop off, it doesn't mean that where the pole is going is exactly where it's gonna drop off. There is gonna be room between the drop off, the beginning of the wetland, and the edge of the road. My question is, and I do understand that the property, the abutters have a right to know what's going on in the area, is would their questions make any difference in terms of the determination of the commission based on the Bolton bylaws and the Wetlands Protection Act? Like, would it make a difference in terms of what kind of conditions you put on this sort of project?
That would depend on if they
I
brought
was gonna
something
say,
up.
it depends on what
That's
questions
we're
would be
bringing.
raised, yeah. I mean, so what do the laws entail now? I mean, I'm sure we have some sort of right to condition it, but there's only so much you can do, right? I mean, the electric company basically has it right away,
Well, the
right?
same sort of thing you were at the last time, you can either make a positive determination that you don't have enough information, or that you find you can issue a negative determination, and if you think a condition is appropriate or needed, then we would do that. I guess I was just suggesting that since we haven't seen them, it's brand new information, again, it's not a lot of disturbance necessarily, but it would be helpful to let the public know, and, to.
Yeah, one of the things
I'd be nervous.
I was concerned about, that I asked about, was are the wires gonna be higher? And if they were, that would mean that more trees would be trimmed, for instance. And I guess
Yeah,
it's.
that would be good to
Yeah,
find out.
those kinds of questions could come up.
So I guess the question is would you grant an extension under the act so that we could have you file another, we could do another legal notice, and if not, then you have to make a determination.
Does it all have to be coupled tonight? In other words, could we give a determination on Ballville, because that did have public notice, right?
Well, that's the only thing, I mean,
Could we split the two?
Unless they want to file a new request for determination, I don't think you can split it really at this point, because you can't make a determination, issue it, and then
Right.
reissue another one for the other.
Because then like I said, there was just such a high level of public interest, and I hate to not give
Yeah,
people the
legal
opportunity,
notice.
even though I have a feeling I know what most of them will say, and whether or not it's pertinent, at least they'll have the opportunity to say it. In which case, can we extend this to the next meeting? I mean, can we?
Well, I don't think you can get a legal notice
Really
in
can't.
time for the next meeting, but you could for the first meeting of March.
And does that completely destroy your, well, you guys are gonna be digging for the next couple of weeks at least out there, unless you're digging through snow. Is that possible? Does that throw your timelines?
I would have to check with the client. I mean,
Yeah.
I have no idea in terms of what their schedule is, but I mean, if they are having all the selectmen and the board meetings, it means that the process is going pretty slowly, so they might have enough time.
I think
Yeah.
Well, the snow's not gonna be melted by the first
No,
meeting.
no, I know.
Okay, so that's where I guess we are, right? So you wanna make that request formally?
Sorry, what request am I making?
To extend
I was not paying attention.
extend the meeting, to our first meeting of March, so that we could give.
Make a motion that we extend the meeting to the first week of March, so that we what?
Get a legal notice in the
Get a legal
newspaper,
notice in the newspaper.
and get any alternative, Liz was asking for alternative information, if they've already done the study, then it should be available.
Sure, that. in favor?
So we need to give it a time, so that would be April, March, what did I say, I had that list of all the meetings.
First
I
Tuesday?
think it's March
Second
3rd,
Tuesday?
I think it's the same date as oh, you know what, you guys, I didn't have you sign that other form, I needed to do that. Yeah, March 3rd, so you want to do it at 7:30?
Sure,
I just had you sign something for that.
Is that what Lexington is? Cranford, Black Grove Hills?
Probably not.
That's what I know.
March 3rd.
Okay, and so if you can get the information in before that, so that,
Yep.
we can draft the legal notice. I'm leaving this on Thursday on vacation for a week, so,
Oh, actually,
okay, that'd be great.
thank you. Night.
Thank you.
I hope you're going someplace warm.
Yes.
Okay.
So can I just have you sign that other determination, so, because we forgot to do that. In, you don't, Anna, since you did. So Liz, Maria, I'm sending around the Vickery one, Lori, don't sign. And then,
So I think we're ready for Craftsman Village. The Bolton Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, Wetlands Protection Act and Riverfront Act on Tuesday, February 3rd, 2015, at 8:30 in the Holton Building, 697 Main Street, Holton. To consider a request to amend the order of conditions filed by Craftsman Village LLC, proposing to reduce construction of single-family homes from 42 to 30 with associated drainage appurtenances and modification to the operation and maintenance plan for Sugar Road. Hi, good to see you.
Nice to see you too. I'm Mark Fagan from Craftsman Village, Fulton. This is Sophia Papalito.
Okay, wait, too fast, I know you get it. I know you were here, but it's been a while.
It's been a while.
So I know you, Mark, but,
Sotir, S-O-T-I-R.
okay, wait a second. Oh, S-O-T-I-R.
P-A, last name is Papalilo. P-A-P-A-L-I-L-O.
I'm gonna quiz you next time.
And I can get the last name.
And this is Sue Carter from Places, our engineer. Two things I want to point out first. There's no horses, and all our utilities are underground. So I know that there's a lot of new members, so I can give a little bit of background on the property in general. And I'll try to scatter in as much information that seems Conservation Commission pertinent, but I'm sure I'll miss some.
Oh, okay.
Sue can fill in the blanks, and certainly any questions that you have, we can go through. This is the site that was previously approved back, believe it or not, in 2004 for a comprehensive permit.
Trying to get my clearance here. So where's
Okay,
Sugar
so
Road?
this is, Sugar Road is up front. The
Okay.
Colonial Candies is right here, and 117 is up here.
Okay,
Okay, is that up?
yeah, so there's a light here. Right.
Yeah, and the light is here,
Okay.
495 is there, and the commercial building is in this location, just up there.
Okay.
Okay, is that up?
Thank you, it does.
So this parcel, it's about 15 acres, just under, was previously approved for 42 detached single-family homes back in '04 through a comprehensive permit. Kind of languished for a while with a variety of issues. We ended up, the person that did the permitting, he had passed away, he actually sold it, actually Freddie Freitas had acquired it, and we acquired it from Freddie Freitas just several months ago, actually. So we now own the property, and we have redesigned the property for 30 detached single-family homes versus the 42. So these are 30 two-bedroom homes, are about 1,900 square feet, so relatively modest by today's standards. Instead of a large integrated community water supply and a wastewater treatment facility, part of our redesign was essentially breaking the parcel up into 5 lots. So we essentially have 5 lots, which it's not crystal clear with the way that it's laid out. So we've got 1 well that services 6 two-bedroom homes and services 6 septic designs. So you're seeing the septic systems in these open areas. From a design perspective, whereas previously it essentially was a circle kind of looping across, we wanted to try to keep kind of the access to the wetlands a little more open. This whole area in the center is really all green space. So it's kind of this big kind of finger of green that we intend to go out and create these individual little courtyards for the homes to make them really clusters of homes that are all tied together by some open green space. The building area that we're putting the property in is generally consistent with the areas that were being located before. With the 42 homes, again, they had a much denser, the wetland line and the 25-foot line that was previously established. Those have been maintained, they're not any closer to the wetlands. From when we were here last spring, we made some modifications and actually, cut back some of the, we had these driveways cutting into it, and have a little more pavement in closer proximity to the wetlands that we took out. For the plans that you're seeing, we've shaded the paving. So essentially, we've got the vehicular access really coming on the outside perimeter of the properties, with the homes being focused on the center. You see for garaging, we've got a combination of detached garages, some garages under. Everybody has a 2-car garage. We've incorporated a reasonable amount of visitor parking throughout the property for people that's pretty evenly dispersed.
And I hear somewhere that one of the reasons for having some detached garages is to minimize the distance to the pavement?
To minimize, no. You mean for the garages or for the homes?
If all the garages were attached, then the pavement would you have to have more pavement.
You'd have to add more pavement, exactly, yeah. So we kind of wanted to make this a community that was more focused on the people and pedestrians as compared to, the vehicles. So that it's really almost like an alley design if you look at it, that we truck them around the back and all of the homes focus in on the green space as compared to the, facing their driveways and facing their garages from a design perspective.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
There's currently an old stone wall that runs along Sugar Road here.
Yep, you can see fragments of it are identified on the site with the little round circular rocks where it's contained.
So, in order to establish these new driveways, are you having to remove any existing stone wall?
There's some areas that will be, there will be some that we'll essentially open it up and then relocate it to fill in the gaps and extend it where we can.
So you feel you have to create these many entrances into this development?
We do. Actually, it was a comment that Carol had submitted to the zoning board of appeals.
No, it was from the commission. We had
From the
earlier
commission, I'm sorry.
discussion,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, there was discussion about it, so we had conversations with the zoning board of appeals, and they felt comfortable with this design. We had very specific discussions about that.
So you don't see any issues with sight lines with traffic, having these additional, cars coming out?
No, the locations of these here and here are essentially where the previous locations were. So the only really new location that we've added is the one on the
edge.
The farthest edge, yeah. And the sightlines there are adequate.
And that one in the middle there can't just be one?
From a safety purpose, they figure, for accessing in, accessing out, they felt it was better suited having them broken instead of a wider one from a design perspective. So that was the ZBA's determination.
These opening this here, is that for the candy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and
So
the
they're
other
somewhat lined
entrance is,
up.
the other entrance is here, yeah. So last spring and, well, I think we met last winter, and then in the spring, we went out, we did a site walk with the commission. I think Carol had met with Sue's partner one or two other times on the site to review the wetland line. And we had made the request last spring that we were seeking to amend the order of conditions, and that was agreed upon by the commission as being a reasonable approach as compared to doing a new one. So what we have submitted is a formal amendment for the amendment. Really, I think that any of the conditions within the permit that we sought to change were really substantially eliminating items that had been that either weren't relevant because we didn't have the same systems in place, or work that had been completed. Again, there was a number of discussions about the community well system, the big cistern that was located back here within the wetlands, so we're no longer doing. There was significant comments about the actual installation of the wells, which they've all been installed. We're not going into the wetlands to deal with them anymore. So those were taken out. There was a list that we had put together as suggested modifications. That's the basics of the information. I don't know how detailed you want for a description or anything.
Can I ask a question? What are these symbols here that are in the wetlands?
Those are the existing wells.
The existing wells?
Yeah, so those were installed 5 years ago or so. And these water.
Actually,
these-
closer to 10.
Probably
Is it?
15.
Yeah.
I think it was 2006, 2007. We had a good cold winter, and they drilled through the ice and put the wells in.
And you can see where they connect into a little hub here in the bottom, that's
Mhm.
installed.
So,
So
see, I
all
don't
the-
remember the water lines being installed.
Yeah, I said there's a hub for, whether it's for wiring or
Yeah,
just is in.
Kevin said that rather than disturb the wetlands a second time, he ran the electrical and the water supply lines back to a common manhole outside of the wetlands and just outside of the 25-foot no disturb, just so he could find them all when the economy turned around and he was ready to get going on the project.
Okay, so wait, I'm not still, so you're saying that the prior developer put in conduits from the wells?
Right.
To the hub?
To the hub, yes.
So then you don't need to do any, you know that they're there?
Right.
Okay, because I don't remember him doing that at all. Because I don't remember him restoring or replicating any of that area.
He told me he did it, and there's a manhole out there with the lines and everything coming in.
All right, we didn't look at that when we were out
Yeah,
there,
we-
right? The manhole?
We did maybe
Did we?
a few, the group
That's-
got dispersed a little bit, the manhole.
Yeah, I remember.
That rings
Yeah,
a
the
bell.
manhole, the
Yeah,
manhole is
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Pointing out where the wells were,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so the intent was that no further disturbance needed to be done, within the 25-foot zone of the wetlands. The wells are installed, the conduit is there, and we can access them from this point to deal with it.
I think what he did, I think he used the same area where they brought the well drilling rigs in and the mats were laid down. I think that was the same basic area where he ran the conduits so that if it was gonna, once nature healed itself, it would happen once and not be redisturbed again when the wells went, or when the project continued.
So what we had submitted for the benefit of the board was the cover letter, obviously the list of abutters, which I have, the original order of conditions, the modifications that we talked on briefly, and what we had also done in conjunction with the zoning board of appeals is the whole drainage analysis was submitted to their consulting engineer, it's Niche Engineering, Niche out of Boston. There was a series of communication between Sue's office and them. In the memo that was included, it had kind of a question and response, in which essentially I think all the drainage issues were resolved. There was a couple of details that would be incorporated in the construction drawings. Where certifications would come with the manufacturers for particular items that we're gonna be in. But in terms of the overall, drainage review, that was reviewed, some minor modifications were made, but essentially they've signed off on it. So, that has all been evaluated.
I have some questions when you're ready.
Okay. Yeah, and then a plan set was submitted, as well as an operation maintenance plan that was requested. So.
I mean, I don't know if you guys got a chance to look at the link that had all that stuff, but I did kind of quickly look through and have a few questions, some details that I think I would want to be able to consider whether we wanted to have as conditions or not.
Sure.
So, some of them are just picky because I don't know what they are, but there's something that's labeled FES inlet with a debris grate, and I don't understand what that is.
That's a flared end outlet, flared end structure with a debris grate, so,
So it's being something's being outlet at the wetland edge?
yeah, and I realized it got turned off on this plan because it was so cluttered.
Do you want my big sheets?
Actually, Mark Smith is going to steal his.
She said it didn't get.
To make this clean, not everything is on it, otherwise you
yeah.
can't read it.
When I had everything on, I kept looking and saying, turn that off, turn that off. 2 seconds. Let me get the- All right, rating and drainage. So what we have is, we have an overflow structure by where there's an existing culvert, but we also recognize that there's a lot of ponding in the wetlands. So in this area, we have a flared end outlet that's gonna take, if the water ponds in this large wetland, to overflow it and bring it through the site into the basin. So what we've done is we've called a flared end structure, which is basically just sort of the splash pad with a debris grate, mostly because it's such a long run. We didn't want the kids to get in there, or raccoons or other critters to get in there and nest and block the culvert because it's such a long run. You may or may not notice it until you really need it. So we felt that it was prudent to put the debris grate on it just to keep some of the critters out and not be so attractive. It's a 24
I
inch
guess I'm
pipe.
confused. So you, historically, you know that this floods over the edge of the BBW, is that what you're
Yes.
saying?
So the drainage counts that we prepared before, and it actually, I don't remember who said it, but at the previous meeting, what happens is, if I can show you on the somewhat colored plan, is we have a large wetland area here. There's an existing pipe that goes down this wetland system, a stream, to a culvert under Sugar Road.
Yeah.
But what happens is this culvert's a hydraulic restriction and there's a relatively low area here, so this wetland would overflow. There's a low spot opposite of the driveways for formerly Hebert's, now the Colonial Candies. And this would overflow across Sugar Road and then go to the wetlands on the other side. So in our modeling, what we've done is to try to route the water rather than having it flow through the site, is we have a 24-inch overflow pipe that brings it across the site and into our basin.
Why wouldn't that qualify as a wetland?
Because it doesn't meet your other criteria. It doesn't have the soils or the vegetation for that. And that only happens in
It's more like floodplain?
It's a flooding area that when we had a high area, at one point, there were beavers in this culvert, and then the culvert collapsed. And I think that was the time frame where they saw the water overflowing. And I don't remember if it was the DPW or the neighbors, but when we had the process before, someone said, oh yeah, it does do that. And I was like, good, my drainage counts predicted it.
Then, I guess the question I have is, are we changing the hydrology for that wetland? Because it sounds like it's going to your infiltration basin, it's not going to the wetland.
Well, no, it's going to the infiltration basin and then that overflows to the other side of the street, so it continues over.
So it is going to the same
wetlands.
wetland, but not at the same point?
Right, it's not going at the same point, so that it's being controlled to go under Sugar Road rather than to pond up and overflow across the roadway. And this is the same design as what was previously on the previous plan.
Oh, I can't remember that.
No, that's okay.
But that was the one thing that we tried to do, is we recognized that currently it ponds up enough, it'll flow across the field, and we wanted to control it, which is why we have an outlet pipe.
And what, so the elevation is, what did you use for the elevation? Like, so is it, it's not gonna happen unless it gets to a certain flood stage?
Right. Oh, it's not plan. I'm like, why can't I see it? I need my glasses. It's on this plan.
Have you noticed the flooding across the road now?
No, I haven't lately. No, I'll be probably sure the wrong look on it.
That's
But I don't recall
10510.
one here. It's not a normal occurrence, I'd say.
I know, so that doesn't mean anything to me. I mean,
Okay,
is
it was an elevation so that when we modeled this wetland, we had similar flooding characteristics as we currently have.
So it's not gonna drain the wetland?
Correct.
Okay.
It's set higher, so it basically,
So what if you get beaver in there again, I guess?
The current outlet
Then-
structure
then
is
it
at
will also-
103.3, if that
So-
helps.
I'm sorry.
The current outlet that's installed is at 103.3.
So it's 2 feet higher than the existing outlet. So
Okay.
it's more so that in a flooding event, it enables us to control the,
Yeah, I did,
Flood
that
water.
helps with
Yeah.
that, yeah.
If it was 101, that would be bad.
Is there an outlet from the
Yep.
basin?
this comes through, and there's a pipe under Sugar Road that we're tying into. When this project first was proposed way back in 2002, it was even before Sugar Road was reconstructed. So at that time, part of the deal was they took some of the property from the previous owner, and he had them put the culvert under Sugar Road for him for future use.
I just want to clarify too, before we go on, because the project was a 40B, they asked, and this was again, not places, I mean, not Craftsman Village initially, but the original applicant asked that the bylaw be waived. So if you're thinking about it from a bylaw perspective, that was waived initially, and the ZBA hasn't considered, I think, reinstating it at this point, although I think Nitch did ask that they consider protecting more of the 75-foot adjacent upland resource area than is being shown, which we can talk about. So I guess I also wanted to ask you about staging, phasing, and storage of materials and all of that. I wasn't really clear, you know, what the actual construction process meant, what you're thinking is going to be.
Yeah, our schedule.
And maybe you said it before, but I don't
Yeah,
remember.
I think within the plans, there was some staging areas that were located. Essentially, we're planning on working on these two clusters first.
Can you
So
just name them, because I remember them.
Well, we don't have them. It would be units 13 through 18, and would be the first phase, and then the second would be 19 through 24. So essentially, you know, these homes, we'll build them as a group. They're all tied into the same septic system, they're tied into the same well. So we'll move from group 1 to group 2, and then whether we come back here or we go up on the front, we haven't quite determined. But it would be working in those clusters. As part of the plan, there are various stockpile areas that were located on one of the plans that were submitted.
do you know which one that
sediment
is? Is that
control?
erosion?
What erosion and sediment control plan?
Yeah. That was in the submittal, and it's been back to that.
So is there any activity going beyond that culvert over the gravel access drive?
No, and actually, that was one of the conversations in conjunction with the zoning board of appeals, because that was a question of the commission. And we don't have any intent. There's, that land is tied into the various lots, so it isn't something that can have another usage. It's really, you know, restricted by its nature. So all we've proposed is potentially like a community gardens back there, if the residents wanted to have it. And we also incorporated wording into the permit for access to community trails or easements as may be needed or requested by the town. If there's a means to tie into a trail system back there, we're certainly open to it. So it is, you know, the permit restricts any further building on the property. So it really couldn't be subdivided off in any circumstance, because all of the acreage is required based upon the well and septic regulations for the way that the overall site is designed. so we have nothing
So
proposed.
would it be okay if, I mean, I guess it doesn't sound like it would be an imposition, then if we wanted to have some kind of visual and a temporary construction fence up, so that during construction,
not
vehicles don't go
stockpiling something
beyond,
back there?
don't go beyond their,
Yeah, we
you
could
know,
put in some, like-
unintentionally, or think like, oh, I've got a good idea, I'm gonna go, you know, dump some stuff over there.
Yeah, no, we could put in, it's like the orange construction
Mhm.
fence or snow fence or something to delineate it, that, to make sure, a truck driver doesn't get lazy.
And to be honest with you, there's only a small area in the open field area before you get up into the woods, and in the wood area, it's all ledge, so there's no.
But in the open area,
Right,
it's
in the
close,
open area, they
it's in the
couldn't-
buffer
you're right,
zone,
you're
right?
right.
So
Yep.
it would be nice to not have that.
Yep.
I mean, we just see unintentional things happen too often if it's not sort of expressly laid out, right?
Yes,
That's
yes,
reasonable.
and the orange fence helps a lot.
Yeah, it does. So, let's see. I guess, can you talk a little bit about the rain garden and maybe show the commission? I guess, I have two questions on the, sort of on the part of, well, maybe I should say, I have two. I have a couple questions about the drainage. One is that you've got a rain garden, so is that supposed to infiltrate?
Yeah, please, I'm just writing my note about the orange construction fence.
It'll be a condition.
Okay, well, that's fine. Sometimes people want me to make the changes, so. The
Yeah.
rain garden, where we're proposing to do a rain garden, I believe is in this little, small area here, which will catch overland flows. So there will be some infiltration there. We've also treated it as, it's not of significant size to make a difference in the drainage there, but we were trying to give a more natural look to it, and knowing that, that was one of the few areas where we could implement a low-impact development technique like a rain garden, so that's why we put it in there.
And why not over here also?
That's our main infiltration basin, so that's gonna be the workhorse of the site. So it's gonna have very variable drainage, like when it rains, it's gonna fill up, it's gonna have water in it. So it just, and in the larger storms, it will fill up, so that we felt that it really wasn't appropriate for a rain garden because it was gonna have so much more to it, and it is an infiltration basin, so we're gonna wanna have it mowed and keep the vegetation off the side slopes. Versus a rain garden, you can naturalize and let it grow, and you just have to keep it clean and free of weeds and, you know, some minor pruning, but it's not the same as a large recharge basin when you have to mow it.
So, and where's the groundwater there?
The groundwater there, for the large basin,
No, first for the rain garden.
for the rain garden,
Closest.
I believe it's significantly lower than that, so it's not,
I mean, we recently had somebody who tried to build a rain garden, and they just were telling us that they were told me, I haven't come back to the commission yet, but that it's intercepted with groundwater, and they're not able to get the vegetation that they had proposed growing there, so I'm just trying to.
oh, it's well above the water table. It's elevation about 95, and the bottom of the main detention basin is elevation, it looks like 89, so
Okay,
it's
so
higher.
then you were gonna say, so
shallow.
where's the water elevation compared to the?
On the large basin, it was 4.5 feet down below the bottom of the large basin, so, I was just about
That's
to.
about 80, that put it about 80, right? You said that's 85?
It was 89.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So it's around elevation 85, so it's approximately 9 or 10 feet higher than the water table for the rain garden.
The rain garden's about 9 or 10 feet?
9 to 10 feet above the water table.
Okay, and so, and then are you taking out the soils that are there, or are they permeable soils? Like, what do we?
For
know
a rain
about-
garden, what you do is you take out the existing soils and you make manufactured soils, so there's a specific composition of organic material. It has a high percentage of organic material with sand, so it'd be a manufactured material put back in there.
It's 2 feet.
Right, 2 feet of it, and the intent of that soil is essentially to polish the water that's percolating through it.
And so, not, I know you had some detail in your plan about
Yeah.
it, but again, so the manufactured material, is that potentially gonna have any invasive seeds in it or
No,
anything?
no, it would be, it's a compost material, compost with sand, and I believe the specification made it on the detail sheet. I know that was one of the comments by Niche, so if you wanna say that it's to meet the DEP standards for rain gardens, the specific soils that they have in their guidelines.
Soil mixture, the soil mixture is here.
Yeah. Well, you have to do a hot
Sterilized,
compost. You do a hot compost, it
And it
won't
kills
have
them all?
weed seeds, yeah.
What about, on the other side here, what kind of vegetation?
Over here,
Yeah.
because this is, it's more of a swale area than a ponding area, that's just gonna be loam and seed.
Can I just go back on the infiltration basin again then?
Mhm.
Okay, so what about the soils there?
The soils there will be a sandy mix, but they will be loamed and seeded.
But what's there now? Like, what's the natural
Same.
It's
material?
sand, it's very well sorted coarse sand.
Everything here, the whole front. All the systems are basically 2-minute soils. It's,
What we talked to Niche about was, when you go through the DEP stormwater regulations for infiltration and exfiltration, they can give you a really high rate for well-sorted sand. And we've had a couple of reviews in other towns where they say, go down one to the next level. So instead of 8.47 inches per hour, it's 2.41 inches per hour. And that's more reflective of having loam on the bottom of the basin, and that's the number that we used when we did the design.
So you're gonna be putting in loam
Right.
on the bottom of the basin?
Right, so, and then it will be mowed.
Yeah.
so the infiltration rate was conservative.
Right, yeah, so
Instead of 8, it's.
right, so instead of the 8, you go to the slower one.
So it's a little slower, yeah,
Right.
so you're not like
So-
the Cape and dumping
Right,
everything
but
on
we're,
it, right?
but we're also acknowledging that you're gonna have some organic matter growing
Mhm.
there, and the loam will slow it down. The higher rate would be more applicable if we had subsurface chambers that were directly touching the sandy
Mhm.
soils
Mhm.
with no interface that had potential organics.
And so, and for the commission, they have storm scepters before the drainage is being dumped into the infiltration basin. So, and they have deep hooded catch basins, so that's sort of their pre-treatment, because, you know, a lot of the times with the infiltration basin, you get a pre-treatment sediment forebay or something like that, but they don't have that.
Well, as a requirement for soils with such a rapid infiltration rate, we have to have 44% TSS, total suspended solids removal. So with the deep hooded catch basins, deep sump catch basins with hoods, and the storm scepters, we've exceeded that.
Trying to use her to educate us, Mark.
Right, but part of the reason why you do that is so that you're not gonna have sediments building up on the bottom of the basin, which becomes more of a maintenance issue. So we're trying to get this so it's as clean as possible, so the main maintenance is gonna be mowing and removal of leaves and stuff in the fall.
There does have to be regular maintenance of those sumps, though.
Oh, of the sumps, yeah.
And that's built into the O&M
Right,
plan that was
right.
submitted, I think.
The sumps are supposed to be cleaned out,
Some are biannually, some are quarterly.
yeah, but typically what you'll find is once they get going and they see how much they need it, they adjust it accordingly.
So, and this is, just kind of jumping around with things too, but in the O&M plan, they do propose to vacuum clean out the storm scepters, and the catch basins are recommended to. I'd like to make sure that we condition those to happen that way. I guess the other thing is that since they're gonna have the vacuum truck there, I don't know what your experience is with it, but I mean, I've certainly read that, you know, street sweeping is not as nearly efficient as vacuum cleaning. I don't know the possibility of having the street vacuumed or the parking areas vacuumed, or, you know, whether that's gonna be needed, if you think, anyway.
What
thought
we
I'd
would
throw that out.
anticipate, and I lived in a condo association for like 18 years, is street sweeping is a normal part of regular maintenance with the landscapers. So they'll do a spring and a fall cleanup. Spring cleanup is traditionally a lot more of your sand left over from the winter and debris and stuff, and cleaning up damage from plowing, versus the fall is more your organics, all your leaves and pine needles that have fallen. So I mean, I still think sweeping is appropriate, and a lot of times landscapers, after they mow, they'll go around with their blowers and just clean the
Yes,
pavements.
I don't see them getting most of this stuff up, it kind of moves it around is what tends to seem to happen, you know?
I think I haven't seen an issue with it, you know, where they blow it and then they, you know, sweep it up and dispose of it. Especially the extra sand and sand in the spring from the roadways.
We can look at that a little bit more, I'll do a little bit more searching on.
But I believe we
places that
did
have been
not
doing
take
that.
credit for street sweeping. You can, but it's part of a normal maintenance for a condominium association with the landscapers.
And it's, I didn't look at all the detail sheets carefully enough. Is there curbing to accommodate the drainage into the catch basins?
There is curbing in some locations, in other locations it's open drainage. The vast majority of it does have Cape Cod berms.
Because it just seems like there's some places where there's long runs.
Right, and that's why we had it so that we won't erode the shoulder of the roadway and we contain the runoff within the roadway.
So is that clear on a plan? If I spend
Yes.
more time, I'll find
It's
it?
on it would be on the layout and materials plan that calls out where there's curbing and where there isn't. And we also felt there were some places where it was critical that the water got to catch basins, so it was controlled, so we made sure those areas had the Cape Cod berms.
How much of this water do you actually capture? How much stays on land and how much goes off-site? May not be a commission question, but I'm sure you've calculated all that.
Yes, basically all the water from the paved portions are making it down to this basin. In some places, it's going through, you know, swales to the rain garden and then being collected, but essentially what we've done is any water that has potential for, you know, having sediment in it from the parking lot will come down and then be treated by storm scepters before they go into the recharge basin. We would have liked to have more smaller basins and grass swales, but one of our big obstacles here is that gas line easement. And we're not supposed to cut any material and be in fill, if anything, over the easement. So that really sort of tied our hands in terms of being able to use swales in a more natural way to convey the water. We've had to do a closed system, mostly because we had to avoid any cuts in the area of the gas lines, so.
I'm surprised they let you pave it. That section where you cut
Well-
over about, I'm surprised they didn't just make you go straight along it.
Well, they asked us to do more perpendicular
Yeah.
crossings as
Yeah.
compared to being on it.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think this is, it's funny, the woman who was here from BSC, we were talking in the hallway, she said, wow, that's a really narrow easement. That must be really old, you never see them that narrow anymore. So this is an older easement, and that's why we're given a little more flexibility with the gas line. I mean, if they were doing a new gas line easement, like they were talking in some of the
We don't even
the
talk
towns.
about that
But-
here.
but-
We're not talking horses, we're not talking horses.
In our conservation land?
We're talking about trees down the road from here, yeah.
No, I'm talking
Did they
about
decide to go to New Hampshire and come down to Franklin?
No, the lateral route is still being proposed.
Oh, I thought they were going to New
Meeting
Hampshire.
February 25th in
All right,
Berlin.
I'm sorry I brought it up. I'm sorry I brought it up. I thought they were going to New Hampshire.
Could I ask, not to change the subject,
But
could I ask, what is a Cape Cod berm?
Cape Cod berm are the, it's made out of asphalt material and it's sloped. So it's not vertical, it's more sloped.
It's not the granite curbing.
Okay.
Like-
It's not the,
And so around your catch
But-
basins, you
but
don't
it's
have
not
granite
the-
curbing?
No.
It's all
either.
Cape Cod?
Yeah, yeah, it's
It allows the-
easier for
So,
plowing and
yeah,
stuff
for
than
plowing.
The typical, so the subdivision requirements typically are to have the vertical Cape Cod berm around the catch basins. I think that's what we're seeing at.
You mean vertical
at
granite?
At the Century Mill, that's what they have.
typically,
varies from town to town.
some towns have them, some towns don't like them. A lot of DPWs don't like the vertical granite curbing because you have a transition. And if the plow hits it the wrong way, it can really damage the plow.
But the Cape Cod berm gets plowed up very easily.
It does, but they also have a tendency to plow it tighter to the curbing than if it's with a granite.
Which is
There's
how it gets
trade-offs.
dug up.
There's trade-offs.
So is that something in the long term, that plan that should be maybe added, is something about the Cape Cod berm being able to function to maintain the drainage?
I think it's implied, but,
Yeah,
you know,
it-
put
it-
something in it, I mean, if they're not, you know, they need, if the road is damaged or the berm is damaged, they're gonna need to fix it to take care of it. So, I mean, it's just a comment, just a
Knowing
maintenance item.
condominiums, that's usually the first thing they do with a spring walkthrough is go, you fix them from here to here and.
Yeah, I
and-
mean, but the properties we've had that, you know, are being, you know, fully managed while we're still building. It's, you know, every spring after they gotta fix the lawns, they gotta fix the berms.
But some of that's in the buffer
where they
zone,
dig it up.
right? So, I mean, it would be helpful that it's, some of it is, right?
That's-
I don't know, again, I didn't have,
There's a
I haven't
modest
looked at the
amount.
layout plan, so I'm not positive.
That's basically just normal maintenance.
But if it's in the O and M, then that's part of the order, you know, then it can be
Okay,
something that's
that's
done, right? So.
We're okay to, I mean, we're okay to incorporate
Yeah.
it, we think
Yeah.
it's done by the, you know, on a regular basis.
I just think,
but
I mean,
if
we
you
wanna make
have
sure
it-
that the drainage is properly
Mhm.
maintained, right?
Yep.
Not a problem.
So, just a couple of other things. So they are proposing to submit their SWIP plan, their stormwater pollution prevention plan at a later point. They did, as I said, they did submit the O and M plan. And then I just wanted to go over a couple of things that were in Nitch's comments, again, just to make sure you guys are aware of them if you didn't see them. So, the first comment talks about, again, the disturbance in the buffer zone and, you know, whether there's, can be any additional protection. So, again, I don't know if there's any other, I'm not quite sure if there's, two things. One is how you're delineating the 25-foot buffer zone and whether there's areas within the 100-foot buffer zone that can be more naturalized. I know you have some green space that's within that, so.
What we've added
But
is,
the pavilion's within that.
and we added to the plan tonight, Mark and I were talking, we didn't realize that my office had missed it. We're showing a proposed split rail fence roughly along the 25-foot offset line.
So that's on this plan now?
Yes, and
Okay.
it's
See the
on top.
blocks. You see
It's
the-
got a block sort of signifying almost like a fence post. So basically, we're coming from behind the garages in the northerly corner, and then we've got retaining wall, so we're tying to the garage and the retaining wall. And then pick up on the other end of the retaining wall, go behind unit 1, and wrap around to like unit 30, wrap around, go around the manhole that has the water lines in it, and then I brought it up to the gas line easement. I did not extend it across the gas line easement, simply because of,
There's no homes there, it's just the access road.
yeah.
So, I mean,
So
we've
we've recently been having, people put a sign that, just says like Bolton, I forget what the sign actually says now, like Bolton Wetland Resource Area beyond this point or something. Would you be amenable to having those periodically along the way so that, it's not, and we're not talking big ones, but something that, you know, your landscapers will see it and at least
Yeah.
they can think like, oh, maybe I shouldn't dump it over the fence.
Yeah.
Sure. Happy to do that. If there's particular wording, if you wanna put that in the order, that would be great. If there's something you prefer,
I think we're trying to stick
We'd like it to be
with the
elegant.
wording that we've had. I just have to look up what it was and make sure
Now,
it's not
some
just bylaw
commissions
related.
have little signs that the commission has that they can sell to the developer. Do
We
you
just
have
have,
those
right now, we
available?
only have boundary markers,
Okay.
you know, for land that we own, so we don't have
Okay.
those, but I can tell you the developer had bought 100 of them already. But I think he's developing a lot of stuff here and there, so he may need them as we go. But I think they did it through Voss Signs, which is what we used for doing the boundary marker sign, so they probably have the template.
Okay.
You know?
if you just give us a sense of what you want it to say, we'll be.
Yeah, and I think if you went to the same, you could check out the same vendor anyway,
Yeah.
because they've already got that done.
And if they're modest, we can, you know, just post them on the rails.
Yeah.
Do you think they're gonna be cutting the grass behind the split rail fence?
No, but you know what, the tendency is to dump stuff.
Yeah.
To dump stuff?
Yeah.
Because those signs, I have them in Grafton, but you don't know where they are anymore. You know why? It's because the grass grew and just covered it all over.
Well, if it's on the fence side where they're mowing, then they should, presumably, they're gonna mow up to the edge of the fence. But if they disappear and it all becomes vegetated, then that's fine with us, right?
That's a good point.
That's a win-win, right?
Until they hit the fence and they're mowing. So, let me just see if I got two other things. So it just, there's a couple of other things that Nitch has asked them to provide, and as Mark said in the beginning, they are gonna be providing them with construction documents. So I guess we haven't usually issued an order of conditions with just construction plans. I'm not that familiar with doing this, so can you just tell us what the intention is then? These are for, these say not for construction.
They took us with
So-
finalizing the permits. The plans are essentially complete. I mean, we're bidding off of them. What we're going through right now is part of our evaluation, from phase to phase. We've got 2 basic home styles that we design, and located them in the areas that we want them. But as we go through and we have the plan that's finalized, in some locations we're flipping these homes. We've got these decks and it doesn't really work with the walkways the way that we have it. So it's the same home plans, it's the same building area, but kind of fine tuning those. And because we've got so much going on with these individual clusters where we've got, some retaining walls and different landscaping needs that we'll have. So we're kind of focusing in on those, with some higher detail. But, the scope of work, the area of the work, all of that is consistent. Just where we didn't have things 100% approved through the various boards, we said that we want to make sure that everybody is entirely on the same page. So that's
So if
really
we
the
say that
extent of
those
it.
should be submitted to the commission as well, then that's.
As an example, everybody knows the word storm scepters, which are the pretreatment units that basically force the water to swirl and separates out just like salad dressing does. There are various different manufacturers, and each one has approvals by DEP saying what percent removal they have based on what the flows are. So if at the time they go to construction, a contractor says, well, I really like Fort Century's better than the CDS units, that's some of the things that what we can do is once they know what they're doing, we'll supply you with the calcs so that you can see that we are within the scope of TSS removal that we told you before.
So is the ZBA planning to use Niche as their on-site engineer for oversight, reporting, reviews as construction goes on? Have they discussed that?
I don't. They're not going to have somebody that's on site on a day-to-day basis from.
Well, usually the town has an engineer who will monitor things for the planning board, and so I'm not like for subdivision. So I'm not sure if the ZBA has addressed that or not, but I would think if things are being changed, that we need to have somebody who's looking at that for the town.
What we would be doing is sending it to probably you, the ZBA, and Niche, saying that the final choice was this model of this unit for the storm scepters at this location, and just give you a final cut sheet of what the final brand name is of what unit's going in.
So like the wording on several of these where it says, shall be submitted, prior to building permits for construction, as part of, we lifted this wording, put it into the permit as part of prior to a building permit, that all of these conditions need to be met, so that's gonna be
so we
their
can add
check to
those,
make sure.
if you didn't already add those into ours.
Yeah.
The one thing I did think that the commission might wanna change, I don't know if it's the one thing, but in your operation and maintenance plan, you have a proposal, that the condo association, individual names and so forth shall be provided to the commission prior to the issuance of the certificate of compliance. We've just had a bad, I shouldn't say bad, but sometimes we never seem to get to the certificate of compliance stage with certain projects. And I guess I'm just thinking maybe that should be provided when there's a certain number of occupants instead of at the certificate level. I know typically you turn over a condo association when you get so many people
That's
living there,
75%. I mean, if you want to say, we want to build into it or modify it to say, once the association is turned over to trustees, then.
Yeah, I think rather than waiting for a certificate of compliance.
It'll transfer from us as the owners to them.
Because if you transfer it over and then they never have a communication with us or whatever, they may not know.
About the certificate of compliance, what do you?
Well, just that we get the names and whoever is part of this, who's gonna be in charge for the association before we get to the certificate of compliance stage. You form the association before then, so it'd just be better for us to get the information of who the contacts are. Because they're ultimately gonna, at that point, become the responsible party, so rather than waiting until a certificate that could or could never happen, I just.
Well, and it could be if we finish all the homes, it could be another year because you just need to see growth.
Yeah, it could be whatever, and sometimes we just
Right.
never get to that point, so I just thought that would be better to tie that at a different point.
That's fine.
You had in your general maintenance, so, I don't know, I'm assuming you drafted it, but,
Yep.
I know that the commission would be contacted prior to certain repairs. And I kind of felt like the next two things, the commission might also want to be notified of, you know, erosion at the outlets, and if they were gonna replace any pipes and drainage, again, if it's within a resource area or within the buffer
Okay,
zone.
that's fine.
Um,
Do you want me to have it general maintenance requiring,
You know, within the buffer zone, yeah, the commission should be contacted. I mean, there should be communication, I guess is what would be nice,
We're gonna
you
be
know.
ripping stuff out, they,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
have
You know,
to
so
be
that-
looking for.
because
One
we had
with
taken
it.
this from the previous order of conditions, and I was just, it was hard to fit it, make
Okay.
it fit in well. Shall be notified. Any replacements within the buffer zone? Into number 3.
Mhm. And then my comment on 2 was, it's not that clear to me now. So on-site vehicles and parking areas shall be regularly monitored for leak and, for leaks? No,
Like oil
for
leak.
leach?
I think it
What
was
that?
a misspelling.
Oh, yeah, it was.
It should be leaks, meaning if someone's leaking oil or something
Yeah.
like that.
Right, and receive regular preventative maintenance, to prevent leakage.
Yeah.
So I guess I was just thinking, so
Soils and spoils.
so that's typically done by who then? The association or by a firm?
Typically, it's the association just monitors what's going on in their site. And it's been my experience that usually condominium owners are the first to point fingers at their neighbor for having a drippy car or an unsightly, beat up
So-
car.
And again, everybody has a 2-car garage, so.
So maybe it would just be good to clarify who's doing this monitoring, you know, that the association.
By the
would be
association,
yeah.
that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, if somebody's brother-in-law stays around a lot and has a leaking car in the parking lot, everyone comments.
And so do you think if, you know, if the development or the contractors or whatever decide not to use the CDS system, we should have a different terminology in
We-
the
Well, what
know,
we
just
did
this-
was, that was what we had proposed, we could just have that, we can update the O&M plan on the basis of what the final, unit is.
That's the spec of what the contractors were valuing. We expect that they're going to use it.
Yeah.
If they have a compelling reason not to and they come back to us, that's why.
Okay, but I think this gets recorded with the order, so I don't know if you want to have to amend it again. Typically, we record the
Okay.
O&M plan so that it continues
Your other
as,
one was,
you know.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Or we could put or equivalent,
Yeah, or equivalent, so, you know,
Yeah.
just so that it's, you know.
Typically depend, no matter which manufacturer you have, the O&M is typically the same. Vacuum truck versus a clamshell, and that, you've gotta follow them, and this specifically says it's gotta follow the manufacturer's recommendations. So, you know, if a manufacturer has a slight modification of maintenance versus the other guy, their rules.
Yeah, so I think adding the equivalent
Yep.
will carry that forward in case there's an issue.
I think that's it for me for now.
I'm just curious, how many 40B units are gonna be in?
8. Yeah,
No.
so 25% would, you know, so 8 and 22 mark.
Something I'm curious and ignorant about is, right, so you have so many units on a well. Where are the pumps? Is that at the well?
The pumps are in the well. Yeah, what happens is the way that there's one system that will be utilized for each groups of homes that has, kind of maintains pressure and then redistributes it. So the water line goes from here, it'll go to, you know, one unit where there'll be the hub, and then water lines will go out to the individual units from that. And that's what maintains pressure so that all the homes have full pressure all the time.
So do you think there's ever long-term maintenance at the well?
No, I mean,
It's-
ultimately, there's a pump that would be changed out, but wouldn't be, I mean, just like what pumps you have in your own yards.
But these are in the wetland?
Yeah.
Right,
So
but
they
that's in-
walk out and they pull up the string and then they put in.
Yeah, I don't know how it's done. I've
Yeah,
never had
it's
to have one done.
within,
Yeah.
it's
It's
within the
within the
well.
casing, yeah.
So they.
So they don't
pull
need
out.
any equipment, they can walk through the wetland to do it?
Well, they may have to wait till the winter because some of those wells at times have been underwater. Not
So if they
underwater,
have
but
an
there's standing
emergency
water
and the
around
well's
it.
not worth pumping,
It's got to do an extension, that'll be.
Well, or if they have to get out there, I mean, Usually they're pretty resourceful, grab a canoe or something.
Well, I guess I'm just thinking, should it be
Yeah.
part of the O&M plan? You know, should there be something that, you know, alerts them if there's regular maintenance? You know, then they, again, they communicate with the commission about it, you know?
It isn't, I mean, it isn't really, I mean, a well, the pump goes, or it operates and then the pump goes, and that's really, has been, you know, my experience in anything that I've dealt with, and then they're literally just changing out the,
Yeah, see, I'm
changing
on a
out the
neighborhood
well.
well, so it's a
They're
little
just-
different, I'm just
yeah,
not
they're
as familiar.
essentially
but
they're
we-
just lifting up the pump and the
you know,
wiring,
we,
and
we,
then,
they,
and then putting
the
it back
pump
in.
goes down, and then they have to put in a backup generating, you know, have a whole new system,
No.
so,
I
you
think
know.
your point is a good one. We'll explore, so we'll take a look at it and see what happens, you know.
I mean, it's just,
If
if
there's an
it's
extension,
something that's worth having in there, but if it's not, then that's fine, I just
We
don't
could do a
know.
very generic one, that if there's any maintenance,
To the well,
or any maintenance not described herein within the buffer zone, just
or,
to let you
or
know.
wetland.
Yeah,
yeah, then we, then obviously that
it's a
they work
catchphrase,
with you on it.
catch-all.
Yeah,
Are the wellheads above the water or below?
Yes, they're above,
yeah.
they're above
Do
the
they need-
floodplain.
Do they need to be at all time for, where they're public water?
But it's
Well,
not public anymore.
It's not public, but they were drilled with the intent of being public, cause way back when,
It was.
Kevin Sweeney was gonna have them all as public water, which is why they were 50 feet apart. So they are above the floodplain and they have a locking cap, watertight locking cap on them,
Okay.
so that they were ready to be used as a public water supply.
Are they
I
generators?
didn't know where there were multiple houses, if they would still be considered public water.
No.
No, the threshold is, we stayed underneath the threshold for what kicks it into a community water supply. 25 people is a community water supply. So with a 4-bedroom home, I mean, with the 2-bedroom homes, you have 4 people times 6 is 24. Funny how that works?
Yeah, that's
Fine. Who pays for the generator?
There is
For
no
the
generator.
generator,
There is no generator?
in what sense?
In case the electricity goes out and the water doesn't work.
That may be a determination for the, I mean, for the condominium, I mean, it's, they're in no different situation than anybody in Bolton is with a well. You know, if you did make a determination to have a generator, then you can do it, but it's not
It's an individual.
it's not a town, it's an individual.
But the pump is
The
common.
pump is common, so it could be something that, you know, the association and the individual groupings could say, hey, let's buy a generator to make sure we have it, so. It's not a requirement, it's something, if they make their decision to do it, then, you know, they could go ahead and do it, and they could tie it in with the main pump system that is there, that's in one of the units. So it'd be easy enough to do to control it. But that would control the pump, and then people might have to have their own generators for their individual house, so you can go all the way down the road. So that's something, if that was a decision that they wanted to make, then they would make.
So I told Mark that I wasn't gonna probably have an order conditions drafted for tonight, partly because I knew that there'd be some questions that I wanted to ask or that others might have to ask. And then I'm not sure that I will be able to have one prepared for your next meeting, because I'm gonna be away for a bit, so Mark, and so I had, you know, the process with an amendment, we don't have any time frame that we have to issue the decision, but, you know, if the intent would be to try to get their revisions, you know, to the O&M plan and start to try to draft an amendment with some of the conditions that they recommended in there, and then any others that we think, you know, would be suitable, or you could come up with something else before the next meeting, you can let me know as well. So I guess we don't have to close the hearing, but we could close the hearing, or we could wait until we could continue it to, you know, when we're gonna have a draft order to discuss, which is sort of our normal practice, which I guess is what I'd recommend. In which case, that would be that first meeting in March 3rd. Is that fine with you guys?
That's fine. I'm gonna be out of town. You here?
March 3rd I'll be here, and then I'll be leaving on the 6th.
Well, so hopefully we know whether we have any other questions,
Yeah.
and then.
And we can communicate
Yeah.
before if you know, if we can spend some time, we'll make sure it's submitted, and at least, yeah, I can communicate with Carol, you know, prior to the meeting, and if we're comfortable with it, and Satya and Sue can be here for any other tweakings, that would be great.
Sound good?
Carol, is there any benefit for us taking a stab at your draft conditions to, so that it could be the next meeting and not off till March if Mark's not here?
Carol's not gonna be here to have the opportunity.
Oh, no, I'm just
No, I'll be
thinking
here
if
for
we
their
could-
meeting February 17th, but I wouldn't be having a chance to draft it. I don't know that I'd even have time to review it fully enough.
Okay, that's
so-
fine, I just thought I'd offer if
Yeah.
that made it easier, cause it sounds like you're already starting to get stuff projected out to the.
We might be okay, we don't have any new
Okay.
hearings for the 17th,
Oh,
so
okay.
that might not be,
Okay.
we have one new one on the
Okay.
3rd, so,
I
or
just know,
continued one.
once we're getting closer to spring,
Yeah.
all of a sudden everybody
Yeah,
comes
it's
out of the
true.
woodwork,
I mean,
and
and
if it would
hopefully,
facilitate
yeah,
things.
I appreciate that, but I think it'll be okay, and if it seems like I'm faltering, I'll let you know.
Okay.
Well,
Sounds great.
anything else? So you wanna set a time? We continued that other meeting to what, the 7:30, so that was BSC, poll hearing. You wanna say, 7:45? Do you think it should be, right? I mean.
It's 5 minutes per poll.
Well, now that you know there's 3.
Okay, so I'll have you guys sign the form that we use then.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let you guys get out of here before it gets too late.
Well, people come to this commission, every time I come here, there's more and more people.
You never know.
All right, so we just have to.
Full house, yeah, we're supposed to have 7, That's right.
I was gonna say, I don't think I made enough copies. Last time we were here, there was a much smaller commission. That's great, though, that people stepped forward and volunteered. That's
Well, we
excellent.
actually have our whole complement here tonight.
Yeah,
7, that's right,
Yeah, the names all
Yeah.
bunched at the.
No, it really doesn't,
at the
yeah.
table.
Did you want to sign something? That's already do.
Oh, you know what, I don't know that, well, I guess I will have to
No,
say it.
it's
really
fine with me,
matters
I just
since
didn't
it's
know if
the
you're waiting
process.
for me, that's all. You don't
I
need it.
didn't pull it out.
Don't need it from my end, so. You know where I
So
live.
we really don't have statutory timelines
Yeah, yeah.
for this.
I know, that's why I was thinking I was gonna about.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fine.
Very
Impressive.
You can put in the minutes that we
Take your
agreed
mask
to,
off. Yeah.
to your timeline that
See
we're
you on the
covered.
3rd.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Let's hope we don't get too much more snow between now and then.
Cool.
Like 2 more snowstorms this week, so.
And I guess I should have, is the intention to start this spring then, or no? I mean, you think you'll be able to start with them?
I think so. We're expecting, to finish with ZBA about the same time as you, so. We have
And the
to submit
state.
to the state, so it's a
Yeah,
question
yeah.
of how long that will be. But we should have everything done by, we're hoping to have everything done by the end of March.
Okay.
And then a couple months with them, and then hopefully come June. By
Okay.
then, the snow.
Yes, June, that's what you said.
But I got the word today. It was
Okay,
nice to-
thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
All right, finally, Cranberry Meadow, Vernon Road, request to move 3 for firewood, come on up.
I don't know how you guys do it until 10
Oh, I
o'clock
don't
on
either.
Tuesday.
I don't either.
Does this happen every week? Every 2 weeks?
More weeks than we'd like to remember. Yeah.
Only we would get up at
Thanks for
4.
your patience.
It was an error.
Yeah, it was nice.
I feel bad. I came and 2 groups came ahead of me with CAD drawings and satellite photos. I've just got a very simple request for advance permission for removal of an oak tree on Burnham Road. I don't know how much you've communicated with the commission.
Well, I think I've completely communicated, but since you didn't get a chance to communicate, probably you should do it, so there's not in the, you know, I'm saying what I thought you said. But can you just spell your last name again for me? I don't
Sure,
have it.
H-O-R-E-S-H.
SH, okay.
Like
So
I
Michael
said-
Lorch.
Yeah, like I said, we're on Burnham Road. Adjacent to the Bird property, Ryan and Julie Bird, there is an oak tree, probably about 28 inches wide. I don't actually know if it's on their property or on the adjacent conservation land. I don't know, but it's certainly off their land.
I did take a picture, actually. Let me see if I can pull up where you're talking.
Sure. The tree's been felled now for 2 years, came down in one of the storms a couple of years ago. The majority of the felled tree is on solid ground, very little that touches water, and I understand that traditionally you aren't keen on people removing trees from conservation land unless it's obstructing a trail, but in this case, it's not obstructing a trail, or it's not obstructing a trail, but it's probably about 15 feet off of the road. Any of the work that I would do would be right on the road, including filling of gas, bar and chain oil. Again, I wouldn't even be in the water. I walk by it every day, and so I know that it's pretty much dry the entire year. Very little vegetation. And I mean, we use it and basically a scavenger in our neighborhood. We use it for firewood. We heat our house with firewood. So I guess I just wanted to run by the commission instead of just sort of going vigilante and doing it on my own. Which is what I would do if it was my own property, but it's certainly not, so.
It's a tough one. We talked about it a little bit last meeting, but
Yeah.
I'd be willing to go out and kind of try to look at it where it sits. We hear to our house with wood as well. I would love that wood.
Yeah.
For the most part, it's, the thinking was different years ago. It's really changed now. When wood goes down in the wetland, they say just leave it. It provides so much habitat for different wildlife in the area that for the most part, they say, it's conservation land. If you have a tree go down, leave it, don't touch it. Which tends to be the way we go. I kind of read through your note. I'd be interested to see other people's thoughts too, like on Burnham Road where it was. Like I wasn't sure if you were proposing that it was an eyesore, it was like blocking sight lines or something like that.
It's not blocking
Yeah.
sight lines, but it is the fell tree that's right on the side of the road. It's been there. I think typically I would agree that you probably would want to remove it if it was certainly in water. It's, again, the majority of it's not in water. The trunk is
Well,
on.
the delineation of wetland is a little more complicated than just if there's standing water.
Right, but what I'm saying is that water never rises, or very rarely rises to the point where the tree is actually rooted. And so, even if I were to go on that area to cut the remaining trunk down, I wouldn't be, I certainly wouldn't be stirring up any soil. The conservation water, which is sort of a tributary to Great Brook, quite frankly, is already quite eutrophied. I think probably from lawns or whatever. I don't know. I think in this case, I don't know that usage interferes with protection. Of course, that's my personal opinion, but I'm pretty confident of it. I was just telling Carol, I worked as an environmental consultant before I got into teaching, and worked pretty substantial in wetland restoration in Wayland, Massachusetts.
Carol worked there.
The Raytheon project?
Well, I
Boston
did a little bit of that. I left in 2000. I was
Okay.
I was there for 10 years.
Okay, yeah, I started in '01.
Okay, so we missed each other.
Yeah. But anyways, I guess my point is I have a reasonable background. If you want to take a look at it, by all means do. I guess I'm doing this. My initial email to Carol was just to sort of make sure that I was sort of going through all the right avenues to do this rather than just sort of doing it. But ultimately this is up to you guys, and this is why you're here.
So are you, I guess, still wondering, is it more of an eyesore, or are you looking for the wood?
Yes.
Or is it both?
Yes.
Both?
Yeah, it's
Okay,
both.
so.
Yep. There was a tree that fell on one of the Skinner's properties that had been down, and that was an eyesore, and I cut that one up too, and yeah, so it's both.
Okay.
Yep. And like I said, it's been down for about two years or so, 2 or 3 years.
I guess one of my concerns is, I'd be concerned about setting a precedent about folks going into conservation land and doing this. And it's
I
great that
understand.
you came and asked first, and we appreciate that. Other folks might not even do that.
I know.
And so if they see somebody doing it, they just think, oh, you can just go and do this. And I would hate to see that happen. So my concern is to say, let's not start something, and let's just be consistent and with the way we apply on conservation land and not touch it.
Well, I guess I wonder if removing it does not interfere with protection, if that sort of constitutes responsible use of a wetland. And I guess that's sort of up to the commission to decide if that's responsible use. I mean, is it a reasonable use? the
Well,
property?
like I said, a lot of what they're saying now is those downed trees are, you know, they're part of that. Whether it's in the water or not, you know, it's part of that whole ecosystem that's going on there.
Part of the habitat.
Yeah, and, you know, and that's generally what it's considered, you know, and within the conservation land. I said, I'd be more willing to drive through and kind of look at the eyesore argument where, you know, if it's, say, disrupting sightlines or other things going on, I wouldn't wanna start
Or
precedent.
hazard.
Yeah, or some sort of hazard I could see, but other than that, it's hard to set that precedent and like,
Well, yeah, if it were a matter of public safety, then that would be one thing, but then that would constitute a hazard. But it doesn't sound like that's the case here.
I couldn't find the photograph, sorry, I don't know, maybe I took it on my phone.
Yeah, I would have taken it on my phone, but it's sort of covered up now.
Did you send those out?
I did.
You did? Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
It's hard to tell with the picture though.
Yeah, it didn't do, you know, it doesn't,
It looked like,
doesn't give it
I
that
looked
clear.
at it, it looked like a fallen tree. What it didn't tell me was what the hydrology was like, where the conservation land boundary was.
Yeah, I mean, so as Brian said, I mean, if you wanna take a look at it before you make a final decision or something, but it sounds like there's maybe a mix. I mean, the last time
It's a tree
sort
and
of
a bunch
said
of
no,
snow.
so that's what I relayed to Michael, and he wanted to be able to sort of make his case for it.
I understand completely about setting a precedent, and I don't really have a response to that. I feel like when you're taking a tree, any time where there's open land, you're sort of potentially interfering with an ecosystem, regardless of whether it's a wetland ecosystem or it's not a wetland ecosystem. But, I mean, if it's precedents that you're worried about, then, I understand it. I understand it completely.
I can find a picture if anyone wants to look.
Okay.
If anybody remembers. This is popping through.
And
So I
so
remember we were, I think there was another house on Burnham where we actually, you know, a woman needed to take down some trees, because of some power line issues, along her driveway. And, you know, one of the things that we decided was, you know, just cut it down as far as it was needed. And it just, you know, begs the question, if we set this precedent, you know, somebody like that would be able to say, well, you know, why can't I just cut it right down? But, you know, the decision was made to keep it up because it is a habitat for other animals. And I think there's probably, I haven't been on the commission all that long, but I can imagine, you know, there's plenty of decisions that have been made where the tree wasn't able to be cut right down. And so we'd have to, you know, reconcile with the fact that, you know, we're not consistent with the decisions that are being made.
You know, in that case, I don't know if you know the Webbs, they're new
Mhm.
on Burnham. Anyway, you know, the idea was to leave the biomass as much as possible. You know, that was the decision, leave as much of the tree trunk as possible and leave the biomass within the resource area.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the first one we did like that
No.
either.
No.
Okay. Well,
nice to meet
thanks
you.
for giving me the opportunity.
Thanks for asking.
And the first and third Tuesdays, if you wanna come out.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
So I think we just had a couple of other quickies, right? I already mentioned the Tennessee Gas Pipeline meetings. I don't really have anything else on that, other than I had sent out the letters to the governor and to the secretary with the old dates, so hopefully they're tracking that. I haven't revisited that and haven't had any response.
You said Berlin only, you didn't say the second one. What was the second place?
Well, there's a whole list. I'll send you the whole list.
Yeah, Fitchburg was I think it was supposed to start like Berlin, Fitchburg, and then everything else, and then we had to cancel with the snow. So it kind of goes everything else, Berlin, Fitchburg now. But yeah, they're all there, just different dates. Instead of at the beginning, we're at the end now.
If I brought the handout, it got filed in with something else already tonight. But otherwise I have it back in the office and here it is, I did file. Here, I'll just pass it around, and then you can take whatever dates, but the Berlin one was the one I thought, originally they were trying to get people to go to the one closest to them, you know?
February 25th now, right, and then the next night will be Fitchburg, 26th.
And then just on the Paulson gift, so when I met with town council last week to talk about the Vickery project, I also use the time to go over the policy, or this, I don't know, the operations of standards, or standards operations of whatever that we had in place for accepting gifts of land. And so they had a couple of comments that they'd like us to consider adding to our policy, or whatever we want to call it. But one of them was making sure that we do have in their environmental review. So typically, you know, when you're accepting a gift of land, or when you're buying land, you know, you want to make sure you've done your due diligence and look to see that there's not any, you know, hazardous waste, or, you know, other kind of encroachments or things that might happen. And so Liz and Jana and I both did a walk, kind of thinking that that would be the good first step, right? And there wasn't so much snow on the ground at that point. That was why we were trying to get out there to do it, and we didn't see any degraded vegetation or anything like that. But they still did recommend that it's worth having somebody put their stamp on it to say that it's clean, so that nothing comes back to you to have to deal with it. And since it is next to 495, it might actually be worth, I guess, having that done. So typically, you know, we've paid for certain things out of our conservation fund, so we just have to decide again whether, you know, the 1.4 acres is worth it, depending on the costs that start rounding up. They did say that, you know, you would do a title search, and typically you would do title insurance, but again, they would probably make that decision after the title search was done, as to whether, again, on such a small piece, not, you know, next to 495, would need title insurance. But those are the things that we'd end up spending money on. So what they said is that before we spend any more money, you know, drafting a deed or doing any of that due diligence or whatever, you know, we should get the, some input from the selectmen to know that, yes, they are gonna be willing to accept the gift, because we don't have to go to town meeting with it, but the selectmen also have to accept it. So if there was gonna be an issue, you know, we don't wanna spend any money before we've kind of gone that route. So next up, I guess, I haven't had a chance to, that was on Friday, so I haven't reported it back to Dawn yet, but that would, you know, I'd see if we could get on their agenda, you know, to talk about it. Okay.
Is there any reason why they wouldn't accept it?
Well, you know, in the past, I can say that there's probably been boards of selectmen that, you know, may have questioned whether it was something that they wanted, that, you know, the town should take out of tax, you know, the taxes or whatever. I did share the tax, you know, amounts, they're so small, I don't know that anybody would have a problem with it, but.
Yeah, but even in that case, was there like Bonazzoli's down on South Bolton, they just do the stop paying taxes, so one way or another you own it anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's likely to happen too.
Well, they tried to gift it, but it was in that little triangle where the old railroad bed used to go through.
I don't know that they stopped on that one, actually.
Didn't they?
I don't know that they did. I mean, I think that one's still out there, but I should, I know they've been trying to.
That was checked for
yeah.
hazardous. And
Right.
there's the old railroad tracks and the
Yeah.
station and stuff.
Yeah. Right, yeah.
Was there,
we.
little abandoned houses down boarded up?
No, you know,
It's,
Sugar Road, South Bolton goes this way, and I can't think
it
of.
begins with an L, right?
Lively.
Lively.
Oh,
Yeah.
Lively,
Goes,
yeah,
yeah, that
It's-
What's in there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
Yeah.
nothing there.
I think it had some basis.
Well, there was some dumping that we found, and that had metal, and so then there was some metal contamination that had leached into the ground. So, you know, you just never know, right, what you're gonna kind of come across.
That's right.
Should I have something else to say? Oh, I guess I was gonna probably say is that there was a piece that the town did take for tax title purposes that's adjacent to it, which we thought was actually really lovely. It had a pond on it, and there was some beaver habitat adjacent to it, and so, I mean, part of the, I think we maybe said this at the last meeting, but part of the whole enjoyment of it would be if you could get kind of this corridor, and you might not be able to use it in the summer, you know, when it's really wet or whatever, but in the winter it was really nice. And so the other thing was that we might also look to Union College to see whether they have an interest in doing anything with their property protected or gifted or, you know, so.
We need an easement for the Paulson.
We wouldn't have any access to it, so
Right.
that would be an issue about monitoring it, you know, like
Yeah.
if we're gonna monitor the land that we own. But you might be able to get there, could we get there from the cemetery and then?
It looked like
Look
to
at
the
file.
map, you could go,
One second, I have the map right here.
Does it abut directly to 495? Could you get to it off 495?
You could if you had, but there's a fence.
Just park along the highway.
It's
stop it, yeah.
fence.
Yeah, but no, it doesn't butt.
Go right there.
Trailer.
Well, no, so the Colonial Candies owns this piece in between, the town owns this parcel with the cemetery to the center line of the stream, and then Colonial Candies, that was another, we thought we could maybe contact them, then the town of Bolton, and this piece. So, I mean, that maybe that's, you know, again, part of the discussion we had with the selectmen is that, you know, if we can get these other ones.
Colonial Candies spans over 195?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, wow.
right. And I think I pulled all the taxes on all of those.
Property, and then they sliced
Yeah.
it. when-
Right, yeah, 495 went to,
Wow,
right.
okay.
Let's see if they.
They live upstairs.
Okay, yeah, I know. All right, that's it for me.
Okay.
Chase
Are we done?
Enterprises.
I am,
Very
everyone
close
else,
to it for a few
motion
years.
to adjourn?
All right, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
We,
All in favor?
Nice.
Aye.